On behalf of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, the CPA Committee and the Internal Audit Standards Board, I take great pleasure in extending a very, very warm and a very hearty welcome to all of you to today's conference, No Risk, No Reward. We've got 5 speakers today. We've got Mr. Venkatraman. We've got a chief guest in Miss Sally Clark. She heads the internal audit worldwide for Barclays. She was in India and she's consented to be our chief guest and keynote speaker today. We have Mr. Vishwanath Kuchi, who's a practicing chartered accountant from Bangalore. We have with us Ms. Bhavani Joyce. She's the head of internal audit at Infosys, India's #1 or #2 company. And we also have our own Shri Vital Raj, who will be addressing us. We've actually pushed this inaugural slightly at 11:15 to get the first session started now. And could I please request Mr. Venkateshan to take over the first session, and before that, the session chairman is Mr. Venkateshan, Venkatraman Venkateshan, it's all forms of Tirupati, so request Mr. Venkateshan to kindly take over the dais. He'll be the session chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sri Priya. And very good morning, friends. And it gives me a great pleasure back in SIRC. And first of all, congratulations to the organizers, SIRC, Sri Priya, Vidyadharan sir, all of them, for a great event on internal audit. We have seen the internal audit over the years, how transformed, and today where are we? So congratulations and best wishes for the event organizers. And they have captured money, fraud prevention, risk management, things like that. Very good. And when I received the brochure from Vidyadharan and Sri Priya the other day, I was wondering what is the click and mortar actually. So I thought, I've been only knowing about brick and mortar and not click and mortar. And that got a lot of inspiration in me. What is really a click and mortar? Are they saying about, how internal audit has transformed over the years? Or the speaker, who was there in a Flipkart company, and thereby they have given the name of a click rather than, manual. So when I started my career, while doing the articles and then the career, we used to have many manual accounting. Today we have come, the CP events going live, polls, and she is talking about the emerging technologies. I started my career with a lilac pencil, in those days we have a pencil with a violet color pencil, and we do that, clicking and tallying and all that. Today we do only with the fingers, no pencil. In those days we have a manual notebook. Today we have this notebook, no manual notebook. And in fact, in those days people used to write in Tamil, like that, So those kind of manual accounting, and I recall how, even from my own experience over the last 28 years, how internal audit has really transformed. Today we talk about technology in doorsteps, everything in mobile system. So that brings me a lot of, inspirations, and be with here in SIRC today. Mr. Venkatraman is a commerce graduate from Kerala University. He's a member of ICAA and CAA, Certified Internal Auditor from the Institute of Internal Auditors, US. Also the, ISACA, that is CISA certification. And he has got 20 years of experience. He brings wealth of experience from companies like Jindal, companies like, Bar, Audit Birla Group, and he worked in Deloitte. So if you see his career from a manufacturing, from a service, and presently he is the Vice President and Head of Internal Auditing in Ashok Leyland, which is a very premier company in vehicle manufacturing, great company, and he is also heading the information security. So look at the subject per se, how internal audit has transformed, and look at the speaker and his profile of varied experience. Probably is a fit guy for all of us today to share his experience and how we faced the challenges in the internal auditing, and also how, as a profession, internal audit has developed over the years. And I would also see that he has got a hobby in Carnatic music. Normally, I have not seen persons in the internal auditing to see the Carnatic music, but there is a relevance for me to say so. You know, as auditors, I always find, you know, in Tamil they say gatam. You know, usually there will be a mritanga only, they have two sides. For an auditor, it will always be on all sides. You know, either the managing director will call and ask, either the client will come and ask you what is that, the taxation guy will come, the accounts person will come, CFO will be there. All sorts of things, first question will be for the internal auditor. So I see a gatam. And if you know the Carnatic music, probably he will probably enjoy the music rather than, you know, being caught behind that. So let's hear for the next, 45 minutes to 50 minutes, hear from what his experience is all about, and probably there will be a question and answer for 10 to 15 minutes, and then we will sum up. If at all anything required, I will probably add something and close the session. Thank you very much. Over to Mr. Venkatraman.
Is your mobile, sir?
Yes, sir. Okay.
So while we get hooked up, I thought let me just answer him. I've been used to facing the music, while listening to music is still remaining a hobby. Morning, everyone. At the outset, let me thank the distinguished members of the Institute of Chartered Accountants for this opportunity and also the very kind words of warm welcome. As Mr. Venkatesh has mentioned, I expect this to be around 40 to 45 minutes, largely around experiences in my travels of the last 20 years. I meant travels, not travels, but both are relevant. Okay, now, internal auditing is such a profession that, one can go on and on with respect to whatever domain it be, whether it be, it may be the technique of internal auditing or whether it be, the experiences one gathers. So in the interest of time, what I will do is I will walk you through some of my experiences, and as the session clearly says, it's about click and mortar. I was also a bit confused when I got the theme, because I thought, I can understand the online business, but never heard click and mortar in the past. I've heard about click and mortar though. So let me begin this session without much ado. Is it audible to the audience here? I see a few of my friends here, of course, right at the very front rows, and Uday, who was earlier with Ashok Leland as well. Just before we get started, how many of you are chartered accountants in this room? Okay. Now the reason I ask that is you are hearing it from an odd man out. More importantly, how many of you are practicing chartered accountants? Very good, almost 50 to 60%. Okay, I thought let me start the session with a photograph of a few things and a person. How many of you recognize a person on the left of the screen? Almost everybody would have recognized this as Navjot Singh Sidhu. And Sidhu had a penchant for making some very unique phrases. The objects on the right are nothing very new. So the statement that he made is that experience is a fine-tooth comb which a person uses after he has gone bald. I'm getting there. So, a disclaimer, as we all in this profession have been used to giving disclaimers, I am no different as well. These views are purely mine, and you can not hold any of the professional institutes or Ashok Leyland for the statements that I make. Let me just take a few minutes of yours to understand your expectations from this session, because accordingly I can tailor my, although there are a few slides here, I thought it's better that slides remain what they are, but I will keep ambling on to talk about things that I believe are relevant for the internal audit profession. So maybe a few minutes of your time as you collect your thoughts. You all come here spending amount of money and you have certain expectations from the session as well. So may I hear it from you in terms of what your expectations are? You need to be a bit louder. Do we have a mic which we can sort of pass around?
Latest trends in internal audit.
Okay.
And tools and techniques.
Tools in the market. Well, I'm sorry, I'm not in the Big Four anymore, but yeah.
Equivalent to CEO, because now he is encompassing all the functions and he is also a strategic partner in the business. So what is the future of that as the internal auditor profession? So we heard that there is many more things to come for internal audit profession which will raise the bar.
Absolutely, yeah. That's a very pertinent point. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah, Uday, please. Don't ask questions after you've left Ashok Leyland.
So we recently had the Walmart purchase of Flipkart. So what do you think is the emerging role of internal audit in such transactions? Do you think that an IA can play a proactive role in such transactions? So, I mean, not necessarily in this transaction, but anyways, on a high level or a generic basis.
Yeah, very esoteric question. I'll try and answer that. I have a few slides around e-commerce.
And probably with the emerging technologies and the recent technical flaws like Facebook privacy issues or what else, how the internal audit focus can shift from the traditional ones to the more technology specific aspects.
Right. That's critical as well, yes.
There are a lot of things about this document it says about the fraud, and I just would like to know what are the experience about the cases of fraud that are undergone.
I have a few case studies. I will try and articulate a bit more on that. Yes.
And how is artificial intelligence influence internal audit?
I would say that let real intelligence first influence internal audit before we get into artificial intelligence.
Yeah, and with the changes in the ERM framework now, the latest ERM, so how is the internal audit going to change accordingly? Because there is more strategy related focus now. So how is internal audit going to change accordingly?
Okay. So you are saying how does internal audit influence strategic decisions?
Yeah.
Okay. Nobody from this side of the crowd. Anybody? Hi. Hello, lady. Over here. Yeah.
How are you able to articulate the expectations in the audit committee to the members of the audit committee?
Sure. Valid point. I do have something from as recent as Ashok Leyland where I have had a very strong engagement from with the audit committee members. I'll talk about that. Not an issue. Is that all, or can we? Yes.
So how the challenges in internal auditor have also evolved over the periods? Like when you started out, what were the kind of challenges? Now what are the challenges, and what are the challenges that you foresee in the future?
Sure.
And the relevance of internal audit around that.
Sure. Okay. Can we move ahead? So I will try and answer some of these questions. Of course, most of them have been captured in the slides. Just thought that if there's something new, such as audit's role in strategy or audit's role in transactions relating to acquisitions, etc. Do we really have a role in the first place? And of course, talking about artificial intelligence, what is it that internal auditors need to be doing? Just in the interest of time, we have, I have about 4 or 5 broad themes here. One is, of course, the context setting, and I will talk about the role of the internal auditor based on my experiences, and obviously it may be quite different from people who have served other organizations. So purely, this is a reflection of my experience at Jindal, my experiences with Deloitte, serving multiple clientele, moving ahead with Aditya Birla Group, and then with, of course, Flipkart prior to joining Ashok Leyland. So as you can see, I've been a Rolling Stone, but let me assure you, Rolling Stones gather no moss has been the saying, but I don't think that's really the case. We also have a few case studies. I will talk about that. The theme for today is no risk and no reward. So when I was contemplating the theme, I said it's a brilliant theme to get started. But I look at it from two lenses, one of the risk and one of the controls. So the way I thought this could be relevant for an internal auditor is, if there is no risk, there is no control, and if you know the risk, you will know the control, right? So this to me would be slightly a different take. It's a wordplay around no risk and no reward, but I would say if you don't know the risk, obviously you will not know the controls. But are internal controls the only way to mitigate risk? The answer is a no, but that's a separate discussion altogether. Let me just move ahead with the definition of internal audit. Now, why is this relevant here? I mean, I know this is a session around internal auditing standards, where the chairperson is from the IASB, and this is a session for the Chartered Accountants of India. But being a certified internal auditor from the IAA, I thought let me use the definition as given by the Institute of Internal Auditors. As you may all know, and internal audit is supposed to be an independent function, providing assurance, and it is the key words being adding value, as also while playing a role of a consultant. Now, what do we do at the end of the day? It improves the overall risk management, control, and governance processes of an organization to help it attain its business objectives. All that neatly summarized in 2 lines. How do we make it practical? Let me just move back in time. And I started my career way back in '94 as an accountant with a manufacturing company. I didn't start my career in internal audit, but after a point, debits and credits did not really excite me. I said, an internal auditor, when my first company was actually ACCA Babcock Limited, a manufacturing company out of Shahabad and Durgapur. And I was based at the Shahabad plant, which is in northern Karnataka. I saw the internal auditor of the function, of the company, moving around, talking to a lot of people, understanding processes, trying to help them correct the processes. I don't know whether he was helping them, but he was at least making reports. And I said, hey, this seems to be a very interesting and pretty exciting activity, because we were all staying together in a bachelor's accommodation at that point in time. We used to be exchanging notes. And an accountant's role was typically debits, credits, nothing more, cash flow reconciliations and stuff like that, things that I used to do. And I said, I'm doing something pretty mundane, and how do I add value to an organization if I keep doing this? At that time, of course, McKinsey's ruled the roost, I would say, in terms of consulting, and typically they should come out with very fancy presentations. So for me, terms like business process re-engineering was something that excited me. I said, how do I re-engineer business processes? And in a manufacturing company, what is it that you can do? So I was sort of, in my mind, I was very clear. I did not want to be doing an accounting job. Pardon me for saying so. I know there are accountants also in this room, but we must be cognizant of the fact that do what your passion tells you to do. And if you're passionate about accounting, do it by all means. I was passionate about internal audit, but that passion grew over a period of time. Let me talk about my role post. This is, if you look at 90s to 2002, as Mr. Venkatesan already mentioned, you had vouching as one of the core activities of internal auditing, right? And you had the internal auditors largely doing transaction-driven audits. It was largely around finance, I must say, whether commercial processes or accounting-related aspects, whether you do stock audits, whether you do physical inventory verification, stock audits the same. But you had to depend everything on manual records. There were no systems, right? And internal auditing was largely seen, let's face the fact, it was largely seen as a compliance-driven activity to support Mao Caro, which was in force from 1988 and later replaced by Caro. How many of you agree with this? If I can have a show of hands. Not many. Okay, but this is the truth. Maybe you guys are part of the next generation. Voluminous reports used to be the order of the day. Risks, controls, or I would say cause and effect relationships were not clearly established. All you had was a report which said what is not going right. The auditor-auditee relationship it lacked trust. Again, no surprises here. Audit was always seen as a pain point, right? There was an absence of computer-assisted auditing tools, and the list can go on forever. Again, when I started in ACC Babcock Limited, which subsequently got taken over, took over by Asha Brown Boveri, the first time I used a computer was to largely document something in Word Pro. How many of you have heard about Word Pro? Right. Excel did not even exist, right? I mean, Microsoft Office tools did not exist. I have seen mainframes. So these are the days when anybody who has an access to a computer was treated as God, right? Because they were privileged to a few people only. And the EDP department was the most sought after department, and they used to generate reams of reports on, I don't know what size of the paper it is, but definitely not an A3 or an A4. It's much bigger than that. So these meant that the internal auditor's view of risk did not exist at that point in time. It was merely seen as an extension of the compliance activity. Now, this applied largely to brick and mortar businesses. Do you agree? The audience is probably still trying to assimilate what I'm saying. By the way, I want to make this session as participative as possible. So feel free to pitch in, ask questions if you don't understand something or you want to contribute. Because at the end of the day, it's a learning session. It is not so much as a monologue. I would rather have it as a participative dialogue here. And the more questions asked, I also learn, you, and hopefully the others will also learn. And we can build on our experiences. So I'm hoping that we can keep this as participative as possible with the limited time that we have. So the question I have for you is, do you agree that this applies applied largely to the brick and mortar businesses in the years that I have just mentioned to you about? Right. Again, see. That's right. So again, yeah, I mean, I've not included banking. I've seen this from a manufacturing lens, of course. But the fact is, yes, even in the financial sector, things improved only after a point in time. Probably in the 90s, it was not as prevalent, or the focus was still on compliance rather than getting into risk-based internal auditing at that time. I hope that is correct. So let me now talk about my experiences. So I forayed into internal audit sometime in 1997 and not between 94 and 97. I would definitely say that most of what I mentioned in the previous slide held true. Audit planning process was largely ad hoc, again characterized by the fact that nobody had a view of risk for the company. It was checklist driven. I will not read it, just leaving these thoughts with you. There was no formal audit engagement closure. You did your work, you submitted a report. I don't think I have seen a process where there was a healthy auditor-auditee dialogue to say why a finding is, what is the impact of a gap on the business. Of course, we did have some amount of closing meetings in Jindal where I worked. But again, it was unstructured. If the business process owner did not feel up to it, he would never turn up for the meeting. And so the reports should go without any formal management response or an action plan. And now that has completely changed post 2000, I would say. The 5 C's which typically characterizes any audit report, which I would, how many of you know the 5 C's? Yeah, great. Many of you know that. And so these are nothing but the criteria on which you perform and review, the condition which is attributed to the output of the work done against the criteria, the consequence of the particular condition identified, the corrective action, or before that I would say the cause which led to a particular condition, and last C being the corrective action which comes by way of both recommendations by the internal audit team and the management action plan as has been identified to mitigate the risk. So I think the 5 C's were not articulated earlier. Of course, there was a point in time when the Big Four came out with something called the fishbone analysis, the cost effect analysis, etc., etc. But I think the awareness was very limited to a select few. And So we did not have in this period a very structured discussion and follow-up on the residual risk for action. But thanks to a few events that shaped our profession, we are much better off today than what it was about almost 2 decades ago. So no surprises here, but how many of you want to take a pot shot of what are the events that shaped our profession? Okay, I hear Enron, I hear socks, shoes, anyone? Satyam, yeah. Okay, you're absolutely right. And so, I can tell you that my presentation is not going to give you anything new, but it is going to, you're going to actually say, hey, I knew all of this. So why did we even have this session today? But yes, Enron is the first one that we all know about. Tyco, WorldCom, then we had the fallout of Anderson. And because of all of that, I got a trip to the US from Deloitte. So thanks to the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, which brought about a lot of, painful auditing practices, which meant that, documentation by companies had to increase tremendously. The number of sessions on risk and controls by the Big Four, explaining what it takes to document a risk, what it takes to document a control, doing testing around that, maintaining audit work papers. I think the amount of paperwork is humongous. But all said and done, the only good thing as I see it, in fact 2 good things. One is the Big Four and probably a few other consulting firms made a lot of money. The second good thing is the people like me who are on the fringes till date, they got a real exposure to risk-based internal auditing. And once that became a core focus, I think that's really when I decided that internal audit will be my profession for the till date. Of course, one never knows what will happen going forward, but at this point in time, it's something that I'm really passionate about, and I really advocate that people who are choosing a career, and if they've decided that internal auditing is going to be their career for the next few years of their life, make a serious pitch for it, and go ahead with no holds barred, because this profession really makes a difference. And don't take my word for it, but there is a tremendous opportunity for this profession to make a real impact in the businesses that we work for. So what's actually changed in modern internal auditing, as people call it? You ask anybody, whether you ask the audit committee member or you ask the CFO or you ask the CEO, the first statement that they will make is the primary focus should remain on assurance. But don't just tell me what has gone wrong. Tell me what's the solution, and work with the business to see how we can collectively work towards putting a solution in place. Right? At the end of the day, who benefits? It's not so much the auditor, but the business. And that's what we should really aim for. Right? Consulting or advisory role is also enhanced. Now, as I just mentioned, through the work on assurance, you actually get an opportunity to identify areas where you can make a positive impact on the organization. So this is the consulting activity. If you go back to the definition of internal audit, which I mentioned at the beginning, it's an objective assurance and consulting activity. So both go hand in hand, right? Again, risk-based internal auditing. The concept of risk was pretty much new. Nobody knew why we had to, why an audit report had to be responded to. But the moment you change the language to reflect what is in it for you, right? What is in it for the business? What is in it for the process owner? To correct the gap by highlighting that this is how the risk remains if the gap is not corrected. And this is the impact on your KRAs or on the profitability or on the way the costs are managed. I think the business process owner sees value from the work that is done, right? Any questions so far? Okay, either I'm not making any sense to all of you or I'm making complete sense. But I hope that's the latter, not the former. As I said, we moved away from mere focus on financial reporting. There is a lot of focus given on operational controls. There's a lot of focus given on compliance. And when I say operational controls, it includes the entire gamut of operations, which is straddling around HR, the manufacturing operations, or the business operations in terms of marketing, procurement, IT, even finance. And although we say financial reporting is a separate domain, of course it's carved out from the COSO internal control framework. But the core thing to note is that internal auditors are not just viewing it from a financial lens, right, or financial reporting lens. There is an increased focus on governance and ethics. I must share with you that, typically when something goes wrong in an organization, the internal auditor is first called upon to say, hey, go ahead and investigate this and report, right? But, investigation is, I would say, an extended function. It is not the core function of internal audit, right? You can have an internal auditor going ahead to understand what led to a particular fraud occurring. And of course identify whether the fraud did occur, who are all involved, etc., etc. But the core fact is, post an investigation, it is the corrective actions that are most important. What do you do by just giving a report on an investigation to say, hey, hang A, B and C? That's not the end result. The end result only occurs when the organization sees change in the process, change in the way ethics need to be managed. And I'll share a few examples here. So let me just move ahead in time. I mean, as recent as about 2 months back, in the last 18-20 months at Ashok Leyland, we've of course helped Ashok Leyland overcome a few investigations, or rather perform a few investigations at the behest of management. And I realized that as an internal auditor, I would be not doing justice if we just sat there and told, while it is important to correct, no doubt the preventive actions have to be put in place, but how do you send an organizational message across? So I wrote to the CEO to say, dear MD, would it, this is what we need to do, and as from a culture and ethics point of view, this message needs to be circulated across the organization. We have a code of conduct in place, and obviously employees need to be sensitized periodically in terms of adherence to the code, etc. Now, I thought MD would say, great, I will send it out, or ask the head of HR to send it out. He actually wrote back to me saying, Venkat, as a leader, I would want you to go ahead and send this communication to the organization rather than me sending it out. Now see the difference. An internal auditor typically is very much inward looking. But the moment you have changed the dynamics to say, why don't you send it out on behalf of the organization, I realized that an internal auditor is also a leader. I mean, not that I did not know as a leader what one has to do, but it gave a completely new shift in the way one thought about the role of internal audit. So I went ahead and released the communication to all. Of course, it was very positively worded, but also the message internally was that we have eyes and ears watching everybody's actions. If something goes wrong, we have a zero tolerance towards unethical conduct, and people will face the consequences. Now, the way you word it obviously cannot be as black and white as you would want it to be. It has to be, using appropriate diplomatic and tactful language. The message I have for all of you is that investigation is not just ended with doing your job as an investigator. You have a larger role to play. How do you shape governance in an organization? What is governance? It's nothing but policies, procedures, processes which drive how an organization conducts itself, isn't it? We have mechanisms to drive stronger governance. We have the board of directors, the audit committees, the risk committees, etc. But as an internal auditor, how do you drive governance? You work with the teams, you ensure that if there is an area where processes need to be strengthened, such as say maybe a delegation of authority has to be revisited or revamped in the context of the business, or even a code of conduct is not adequate to meet the organizational dynamics. Because typically these processes get documented, 10, 15 years back they would have got documented and then it's just lying there on the website or on a piece of paper. But how do you update it to make it more relevant for the businesses that we are in? So these are avenues where we can play a larger role. And sorry if I have spent more time on that particular point. Yes, sir. You had a question? Yeah.
Sir, my point is, I'm an internal auditor myself. In my career of 15 years so far as an internal auditor, I encountered many situations where many people use the internal auditor when there is advantages to him by the CEO or the functional head like that. But if it is anything against them, they just cut him out of the meeting or cut him out of the picture and they go on. What I want to know is how the Institute of Chartered Accountants is going to ensure that internal auditor position is really independent. What I mean by that is, now you are telling internal auditor is independent because the Companies Act is a monitoring, appointment is by the, on provisions of Companies Act, mandatory, something like that. But in fact, if the appointment, remuneration, everything is done by the ROC or the Institute of Chartered Accountant without the involvement of management, and only internal auditor is supposed to give the report, then he will have more to say in the right perspective. And these kind of scams and the frauds which we are seeing in the companies, I will definitely say that 80% of the companies are not ethical. It's definitely saying. And the internal auditor is pointing out the mistakes, but they are suppressing him. This I want you to get the solution for this from the institute.
Thank you for your views. I agree. It's quite natural for people to have a one world view, or a view which may be due to certain incidents or events that have occurred in the past, which we don't need to elaborate here. What I would like to highlight is that independence is a state of mind, right? And an internal auditor can call a spade a spade. There's no harm, and nobody has shot me dead in the last 15 years or 18 years of my profession. But there are times that you will have to, brave the storm, and as I mentioned, call a spade a spade. I have actually walked up to CEO of a company in my previous role and told him, sir, this is where I believe you need to, course correct a few things, because this is how you are perceived, your actions are being perceived. It took me a lot of courage to go ahead and tell him, but he appreciated me for that, right? So it is how you view yourself. I mean, do you view yourself as, because you are drawing remuneration from the company, although the audit committee or the board might have approved your remuneration and appointment, does it mean that you are not working for the company? You are absolutely, you are working for the company. You have to ensure that the organization benefits from the work that you do, whether it be in the role of an internal audit or a statutory audit. Yes, it's also equally important to highlight facts. I mean, facts cannot be sugar-coated. They have to be stated as it is. But facts alone doesn't help the company solve the problem. I mean, if you have a problem with the management or in terms of their ethical conduct, you can always go to the board. And there are times when you actually are compelled to do that, in which case you should put your letter in the pocket to say, I'm happy not to work here because of its unethical conduct. They are not going to change, but my position is at risk. And I'll talk about that as we move forward as well. Right? So, the point is very valid, but as I mentioned, right? Yeah. So, last but not the least, what has also changed is moving away from hindsight. An internal auditor reports on facts based on past data, right? It's always a hindsight. Right? You have to move away and say, what is in it for the business going forward? Bring out insights from the work. For every executive summary that, and this is a practice I instituted at Flipkart and then later at Ashok Leyland, is bring out within the executive summary insight in terms of how the controls are effective, what is in it for the business if they mitigate the risk, and it's not necessarily a replica of the finding, but to say what more they need to do to bring in rigor in the way they can carry out the processes. And last but not the least, bring in foresights. Now that's easier said than done. You really don't know whether a Walmart would have acquired Flipkart the day you have joined the company. But foresight is more about if things happen the way they happen, then how the businesses can get impacted from either a profitability standpoint or from a growth point. It takes a lot of time to really bring this out. So it's not going to happen on day one. So, with the emergence of digital economies, I would say that the risks have exponentially increased and moved away from brick and mortar. Now the world is truly flat. We've got transactions happening on the web, and I would say that with the emergence of all digital companies or the .com companies, including the startups, etc., which are internet-based startups, you really need to, as an internal auditor, know the risks in the environment that you're working. Let me now shift quickly into my experience of 2002 to 2014. Most of it again got covered, but I would say that the focus has been on the 5 C's, focus on IT, ERP audits, starting with Initially, it used to be Tally, moved into Ramco. From Ramco, it moved to, this is at Jindal, so obviously the companies would differ. Oracle, SAP, all these, again, within ERPs, there has been a slew of changes, right? So, as an auditor, you have to equip yourself with new skills. You cannot rely on the skills that you gained 20 years back and say that will hold good for the rest of my life. Now, global experiences will also bring in global perspectives. So, thanks to my stint in both Aditya Birla Group and Deloitte, I did have the fortune of working outside India and also managing global teams. So, I think this has helped us, help me as a professional to understand, how to succeed not only within the current cultural environment, also at a global level. Success is not really defined by way of number of audit reports, but also in terms of the way you conduct yourself as a professional, the way others perceive you as an internal auditor. Are you going to be a policeman watching them behind their backs, or are you going to be a business partner wanting the business to succeed, right? So, one size of internal audit or one dimension does not fit all. This is the message I have for the team here. Let me quickly, since I know the audience has been waiting for hearing about click and mortar, let me, all this was the internal audit experiences, so I thought if the session had two parts, let me talk about the experience first. The Flipkart story, as everybody here would be, quite amazed. Even I'm no less amazed than all of you. In 2007, they started off by selling books. Both the Bansals, no brother, and they're not brothers. They just carry a common surname. They started off by selling books, and later the business grew, the volumes grew, and it's no surprise that post the initial round of funding, their valuations increased to the extent that at some point in time, we felt that with the arrival of Amazon into the grand scheme of things, Flipkart may not last. But actually, they grew even further, and they were able to successfully beat the threat of Amazon. Now, today we have at a situation where about less than a week ago, we had the acquisition of the controlling stake of Flipkart by the global giant Walmart for a staggering $16 billion of revenue, valuation, I should correct myself, for a 77% stake. Now, is, for that matter, any .com company in the valuation game alone, or do they really want to make a difference, right? So this is a question that everybody had. In fact, when I was recruited, my question to one of the promoters was, are you in this for a T20 or a one day or a test match or a test championship? So the response was, we are here, very measured response, we are here for a test championship. And they grew, right? Of course, my experience was very different, but I was very excited to join Flipkart. And when I got the opportunity, I was interviewed by none other than Kalyan Krishnamurthy, who was at that time acting as CFO, was also the commerce platform head. But more about that later. I want to share this first with a small anecdote. This is how the conversation went. Now, guess who is the internal auditor? And this is a conversation with one of the promoters. I won't name the promoter because that's not fair on my part to do so. So, who is the internal auditor here and who is the promoter? The one on the left is the internal auditor. How many of you believe that? Okay, very few. So everybody believes the one on the right is the internal auditor. Okay, so
the situation.
right.
It's getting a firing, then this is the kind of
So this is a preliminary conversation. I must say that this happened when I joined and I was going through my induction. Okay, so the left is also right, the right is also right. This is how the conversation went with the promoter. So here I am, newly arrived on the scene. I want to make an impression here to the promoter to say, Mr. Bansal, I'm Venkat and I have joined as the head of internal audit. And so he is okay, good. So I explained to him, he asked me about my background and he asked me what is the process, etc. So the first question was when I explained to him risk and controls, etc. What is risk? So I gave him some example and I said, just to take a minute more on this. Because it's an internet company, I said, imagine a situation where systems developers have access to migrate the code into the production instance. I thought, I was God's gift to mankind, and let me kind of explain things to him in the way that he would understand. So I said systems developers should not have access to the production because it could impact the integrity of the code, etc. He says, we at Flipkart do it all the time, so what's wrong? Then I was explaining to him about risk-based internal audit, and he asked me, why do I need internal audit? So I said, this is how we identify risk, we bring in controls, we help establish processes, etc. He says, yeah, you should establish processes. I asked him, so what do you think are the key risks that should be looked at from? Because I was also keen to get the audit plan off the ground. He says, no, do it, and he didn't have actually a view of risk actually. So at some point, I actually felt that I'm banging my head on the wall. Now you decide who's who, right? So the conversation was not very productive for me. I didn't actually get a very good experience, and I'm sure he also felt, what is this guy wasting my time here for? So I thought, that's a great opportunity for me to go ahead and, after a point, I spoke to Kalyan. I said, Kalyan, we have these directors meet happening every quarter. At the next directors meet, I want to go ahead and make a presentation on what is risk, what are controls, why do we need internal audit. I thought this is a great platform for everybody, all directors. And by the way, Flipkart is majority, 80% I would say is engineers. The accountant fraternity is hardly anything. Bhavani here will vouch for it because she has done audit in her previous avatar at Flipkart. Sorry Bhavani, but I thought I'll just make my point a bit more clear. So, and at the directors meet, I spoke about Enron. I had a beautiful video about how Enron collapsed, etc., etc. And at the end of my 45 minutes video and presentation, and at the end of the session, I asked, so Mr. Bansal, now I hope you are clear. So you're here to send me to jail. That was his response. Because he thought that with Sarbanes-Oxley, and if things don't go right, the promoters or the CEO, CFO go to jail. So I said another day, another time. Then we had the CFO come on board and things began to fall in place. But 1 year later, as we engaged more and more, same conversation in a different forum, different context. I used to mark internal audit reports to him. Why are you marking me on internal audit reports? I don't need to know. Your role is to solve the problem and not tell me the problem. So this was his response to me. Don't tell me what the problems are. Go ahead and fix it. Now, see the role of an internal auditor. An internal auditor will talk about risk, talk about controls, but does he own the process, he or she? I'm gender agnostic, but just using he as a more common phrase. So, what do you think? Is the internal auditor's role to solve the problem or just highlight the problem?
Provided he has the mandate.
Sorry?
Provided he has the mandate.
So we talk about independence, we talk about being objective.
He has the authority to drive the thing. He can advise what is the right thing to be done, but he cannot get it done because he doesn't have the authority.
Right. So you are saying that the auditor, if he has a mandate or the authority, he can go ahead and fix it. But do you think it's practically possible if you are working in a very agile environment where controls are transient in nature? Would you be able to go and fix the problem on the day you have identified it? Would you be the owner of the problem in the first place? That's the first question I have.
Owner of the problem or owner of the solution?
Owner of the solution, as in, even the solution has to be implemented. You go and, when you make a statement, you go and fix a problem.
No, the moment you do that, I will say maker and checkup concept has gone for a
But
toss.
isn't it more of a recommendatory
So,
role that
how do you explain that to promoters of a company? So that was the challenge that I was having. I'm just bringing this out to explain that every environment has its own set of challenges. And no harm, you must work for a startup company, you must work for an e-commerce company. I mean, by all means, go ahead and do it, give them consulting, get consulting roles or whatever it may be. But, it's a roller coaster ride. And that's the beauty of being, having worked in a company like Flipkart. which is why I'm here today with Ashok Leland. So no surprises here. So creating a culture of awareness and risk and controls, I would say that was my first priority. Audit was not a priority. We tried to do a risk-based internal audit reviews. We had a plan, but we didn't have a board, right? We had management committees which were looking at what was required to be done. And of course, they all cared about money. So at the end of the day, when somebody cares about money, you would all want to know that how do we solve your problems to ensure that money of the organization is not misutilized. You're working with millennials. This is the generation Y, right? And I've written that you must read this as engineers. Most of the startups don't have, as I mentioned, 70 to 80% of them are engineers and IT engineers, yeah. So what they're trying to do is create a grand vision for the organization. They are less worried about, whether a control should fail. In fact, when we had conversations with the IT teams, the engineers who manage processes on systems development, etc., they said, no, we are pretty agile. We don't use a waterfall technique. We use an agile method of developing systems. I had to relearn all my corporate knowledge. I was wondering what is agile. I had to do a lot of research on this. Now, how do you then say what works for you and why is it relevant? Right? So influencing peers from different streams was the biggest challenge for me. And last but not the least, it was a culture which was fraught with a lot of ethics incidents. Morning to the chief guest as well, welcome. How are we doing on time?
Yeah, you can continue.
Sure. So what does it take to be a successful internal auditor? If I can have the audience participation, you probably came at the right time, chief guest. So if I can have your views on what it takes to be a successful internal auditor. You heard it from me so far as a monologue in terms of my experiences, but I would like to hear from your end in terms of what you think it requires to be the cutting edge. Yes.
What are his problems and what is he facing really the difficulties, and then put it in the right perspective in the form of roots and causes and benefit analysis to the management, saying that these are the problems and this is the solution to be addressed, and if you address these will be the benefits to the organization. Once he puts it into the mind of the management, and then if they get a pinch of it that the benefits it has is really worth to take forward, and they will drive the things and entrust the internal auditor to implement it. I hope that is the role of internal auditor should be.
Sure, he has to understand the business. He or she has to understand the business before you sell anything.
Not only understanding, but I borrow this technique from pharma industry where they do a kappa for every issue. A kappa is a fix for any issue.
Corrective action, preventive action.
Corrective and preventive action, which will not allow that to reoccur. And they have a very stringent rule like ICH guideline, GMP, which takes care of the robust control over it. Similarly, internal auditor reports should have such type of techniques be implemented. For example, if I am giving a report of internal auditor with so many observations, and that should be followed by a compliance audit, wherein how many of the points have been complied with and how many have not been recurring again. That means fixed.
Right. Anybody else that has a different view? Or you wish to add something to what these gentlemen said?
Actually, we have to add value in this service. That is actually internal audit. As a perceive, we see only the assurance function. We say that we are assuring a lot of things. But at the end of the day, nothing is coming in our audit reports, or rather we are saying that just we have given assurance that everything is fine and go. And after that something happens. But the ball is in the part of the auditor only. Question will come to the auditor only. So first of all, I think we have to add more value by adding some other streams like business process re-engineering, like cost savings. That is more at present we are companies are engaging a lot of consultants for this cost saving and other things. So I think cost saving should also be part of the internal audit scenario where we showcase to the management or the board of directors that by doing internal audit we give assurance as well as cost reductions and other value added services. So the value additions that we have to prove to the management, first we have to prove to the management that it's a value adding service. Then comes the question of other things like assurance and all the things, where we will add value. And last 7 years I am internal audit, and I love this function, and I am passionate to be an internal auditor. But a lot of things which you can do, which provide a mileage to the function in future, I believe.
If I may just have a point of view on this. I always believe that value-added services, of course, that is definitely the order of the day, but assurance remains the primary role and not the other way around. It is through assurance that one can identify areas for improvement.
No, sir, actually assurance is first function, but along with that, value-added other services.
Of course.
Assurance is the main thing. As far as internal audit is concerned, is the main thing.
As you go back to the definition of internal audit, it says objective assurance and consulting activity.
That is the main thing, but
right.
Other services also can add value.
Sure. Anybody else before we move ahead, and then, since I don't want to take up others' time.
Convince the management.
Sorry, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Convince the management and they have to take him into confidence. Only then everything will take place.
So the word convincing can come from two ways. One is to, you saw the picture a few seconds ago. Or the other way is to be assertive and have the right amount of assertiveness, and also use the right levers or knowledge on the risk to explain what is in it for the stakeholder so that the actions can be impelled. Can I move forward? Sure. There's one more question. Yes.
It's about sensitizing the top management to risk, because there's no other constituent in the system which thinks about risk in the way it should be. Helping them understand the perspective of risk in every aspect of the business, from strategic risk to operational risk to financial risk to compliance risk. That perspective and the fact that all risks can be calibrated in some pecking order, that is the main perspective I think we should focus on as an internal auditor.
Absolutely, I agree with you.
Everything else revolves around that.
That's why I said, if you know the risk, you know the reward. But if you don't know the risk, you don't know the control, right? So I put that up in the very beginning. So I think you're absolutely right. What is in it for the stakeholder to correct, right? And what can go wrong? These things have to be very relevant for the internal auditor to pitch the output of the efforts to the management. So I will just share a few of my cents. In fact, I call this my 2 cents. Know the business, and the gentleman has already mentioned this. Unless you know the business, you don't know the risk landscape, right? And if you know the risks, then you know the controls, which are relevant. Controls should not be a speed breaker. In fact, they should be an enabler. It's like the brakes in the car or the automobile that you drive. The brakes are not necessarily meant to stop the car. They are meant to control the speed, right? How many of you hold that perspective? Absolutely. Thank you. So be a true business partner. Now, what does it mean by business partner? It's not putting your arm around the shoulders of the person you're working with and perform the audit. It is to say, how can you improve the quality of the processes, or what is in it for the process owner to correct, and how does it help the process owner going forward in terms of meeting his or her business objectives, and maybe enhance their bonus payouts at the end of the year. They are, as I mentioned, they are to be business enablers, and technical skills are most important. When I say technical skills, it is not just knowledge about auditing. It has got to do with knowledge about risk in any stream that you pick up, whether it be IT, whether it be finance, whether it be human resources, or any other domain where an auditor goes ahead and performs an audit review. The auditor may not be a subject matter expert of the process per se, but the auditor should be a subject matter expert as far as the risk is concerned, right? Asking the relevant questions, that is very important. But for me, most important, and probably even more important than technical skills, are behavioral skills and having the right attitude. This goes without saying. It's, more often than not, we focus on our ability to identify the right audit points from an audit report or an audit review. But what you fail to see is if you do not have the right attitude and the right underlying soft skills, then it can impact the auditor-auditee relationship to the extent it can damage the reputation or the brand that you're building for the function, right? So to my mind, the brand equity of the function is built on not just technical skills alone, but also on the soft skills. And I'm not sure how many courses offer this, but if there's a course on behavioral skills for an internal auditor, I would actually advocate that to be brought in within the curriculum of the Institute of Chartered Accountants. Today, what I find is the most lacking for an internal auditor is the ability to articulate well, the ability to have the right interpersonal skills, and going beyond the lens of an internal auditor. One has to have a 360 degree, or I would say even a peripheral vision, rather than just viewing things from an audit lens point of view. So, no surprises, what works for one company doesn't work for another. It's also important to know that cultural nuances are equally important, right? So when you lead global internal audit teams, you need to have, first learn about the culture of the setup of that organization in a particular geography. So just a quick example here. This is when my first stint in Deloitte was on. We had an auditor or a team member from a company based out of the US who had come down to review operations in Delhi. And I had a colleague of mine who, by virtue, and again, this is not to criticize, this is not to put somebody in poor light. But what that team member did not know is being sensitive to the person who comes in from a different geographical background. So, as is our normal style, we go ahead and ask personal probing questions that are personal in nature. Right? Now, this is really not expected to the point that the gentleman who came down from the US did not appreciate it, and feedback went to the partner of my firm. And this boy was removed from the engagement. Now, why do I say this? Although it may seem to be a trivial incident, we have to be absolutely sensitive to the cultural nuances of the teams that we work with. It may not necessarily be outside of India, but even within India, we have different cultures across different states. So how do we manage that? This is, to my mind, one of the critical soft skills that one needs to develop. Professional etiquette. How many of us arrive for meetings on time? How many of us go to meetings with the board well dressed, right? So I somehow get a feeling that we are not equipped or we have not been trained. So there's a book that this, I probably picked it up when I was a kid, that what they don't teach you at Harvard Business Schools. Similarly, if there is something that can be done to build in this within the ICAI, at least what they don't teach you outside of ICAI should be the curriculum. So let's have a framework where internal auditors, to become successful, go beyond mere auditing techniques or awareness of analytics and tools and techniques which support the audit efforts. Respect individual space and privacy. I think all of these go hand in hand, but the reason I'm bringing this out here is that this is probably not articulated in any of the textbooks, so it's important to know this. As an auditor, you also wear multiple hats, so I would request that the teams which are in this profession be fearless. To answer to the gentleman sometime back, being assertive, being fearless, and having an independent bent of mind are very important for you to possess the right skills of being a chief audit executive or a senior audit team member. And I'll leave one more statement here. Being a brand ambassador of the organization, you are not known for what you are in an organization. Titles don't really matter. What is important is how do you carry yourself as an organization's brand ambassador outside of the company that you work for. So, and I hope that Ashok Leyland, and I'm not selling Ashok Leyland here, I'm just letting you know that Ashok Leyland has had a very checkered history as far as the business and the internal audit skills have been developed over a period of time. In fact, as the lady here, Ms. Sripia mentioned, her uncle was Mr. Sheshasai. I'm sure all of you know Mr. Sheshasai. He started his career in internal audit and went on to become the chairman and managing director of the company. Now, how many of you aspire to become the CEOs of an organization? And internal audit is definitely a great tool or an avenue for us to know about the business and become, the heads of the companies that we work for. Last but not the least, I would say walk the talk. Be serious, but be also, able to have fun. We are serious in our profession, but we don't have to be serious in our, interpersonal skills. We need to have a social life outside of, the serious profession that we are in. Okay, 2 more slides, and then I'll leave the floor open. I'm sure Mr. Vittal Raj will talk about it. I'm just going to leave a few thoughts. Cyber risks are on the rise. There is a lot of focus given for cyber security. Even in Ashok Leyland, we have been increasingly focusing on cyber risk. The audit team works very closely with senior management on this domain. And it's important for us to recognize these risks and be aware that the audit plan will have to be really agile to ensure that the changing risk landscape is tailored into the audit plan for the year. Regulatory landscape is also equally dynamic. Whether you look at global data privacy regulation for the European Union or whether it is the local GST, I think the internal auditors need to be aware of the changing regulatory landscape as well. Artificial intelligence, there was a lady who raised this question whether internal auditors are going to be impacted by artificial intelligence and how this can be leveraged. I would say that, as I keep telling, first is to use the native real intelligence that we have. Artificial intelligence will be there, but that is only going to enhance the lives. The key thing to note is that how do we view the risk arising out of artificial intelligence? How is it impacting the business? Are the processes changing? As a result of that, is the risk landscape changing? As long as the right questions are asked, we will definitely be able to counter the effect of artificial intelligence on the businesses. Having said that, I would request the internal audit fraternity to also work towards sensitizing what could be the core risks arising out of AI and what could be the impact. Even for the profession, how do we see AI as an enabler to enhance the auditing skills? I think that's another domain that we don't speak often about. But for us, if I were to ask myself that question, I would say AI is the biggest threat as far as the profession is concerned, because many of us could become redundant if we are still using the outdated techniques to perform our test of controls, right? So how do we stay relevant? The answer is simple: keep learning. There are no shortcuts. I will skip this slide. There is a publication by the Institute of Internal Auditors. I'm sure you will also come out with something of your own. This is the Global Internal Audit Competency Framework, which talks about the core behavioral and technical skills across multiple levels of internal audit stages, whether you are a manager, whether you are a internal audit team member, or whether you are the chief audit executive. The competencies are listed out. You could probably download it from the website and take a look at it. What does the business really want? This is the last slide, and I hope we can take questions after this. Be a change agent. You should not be seen as a compliance officer or somebody who's there to fill in the tick in the boxes. So, an internal auditor who can bring in a positive change to the work environment is a true change enabler. That person gets credibility over any other person in the same function. And therefore, staying relevant, staying agile, all these are terminologies. I would encourage you to think about how are we really adding value to the businesses that we perform an internal audit for, and has the business really benefited? Is there a mechanism in which these can be quantified, or really is there a feedback mechanism which can come back to the function to say what more can be done to improve the overall state of health? In a disruptive environment, I would leave you with the following thoughts: that risk assessments will have to be done periodically, at minimum every quarter, and in a not disruptive environment. But today I think that very few businesses are not in a disruptive world. I mean, we live in a world of VUCA, which is volatility, I should say, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, right? So when we have a VUCA environment, I think internal auditors should also look at it from their own standpoint. How are you truly being able to add value? Substance over form. And obviously, it doesn't matter whether you have a 40-page report or a 1-page report. As long as the substance is there, I think people will recognize you for that. We have something called as quick action reports in Ashok Leyland, where we issue one-pagers highlighting the cause and the impact and what is it that the business need to do. We don't really wait for a formal audit report to be released for the business to go ahead and make a change, right? And last but not the least, ideate and innovate. Internal auditing is not about just doing the routine tasks efficiently, which you must continue to do, but you must also ideate. Periodically it's important to see what is it that you have been doing, reflect, and then look forward to say what is it that the world is doing, and then keep constantly innovating to bring in better practices. There are two small case studies. If time permits, I will take it up. Otherwise, we will leave it for offline. Yeah. So this is the last slide. I just thought it's important to leave this message with you. Thank you so much. And in case you have any questions, we'll take it offline.
I would like to supplement only one point. Some of them very interesting questions, and Venkataraman used to answer a couple of them in the slides itself. From the professional angle, questions Mr. Gentleman asked about the convincing, about the independence and all that. So there is a standards issued by Institute of CA Institute itself. So we have internal auditing, standards on internal auditing. Okay, the definition is also there, not only in IAA, it's also in ICAI, equivalent definition, which is talking about the independence and things like that. So there a lot of things come handy to internal auditors. It goes from the top, tone at the top. So the gentleman pointed out about how do I call spade a suspect, and many of them don't like the internal auditors because of that reason. So the standards on internal auditing are all recommended as of now. The Institute has come out with the framework on the revised standards, which may be mandatory. The exposure draft has been issued in January 18, and upon the notification it will become mandatory. IASB has been working on that, and soon will become mandatory to all of us, at least to start with for the listed companies. So some of the points raised on independence, and some of the one point on the operation decision making. People have said, should I go only with the assurance and not with the value-added services like consulting? The definition also provides for the consulting, even in our standards SIRC, and which says that we cannot be a decision-making process. Auditors can at best question the decision-making process and not the decision per se. So we cannot be a person involved in the decision-making as long as there is an independence is not compromised. So how do we do that? That's a debate well over. But still, we can give our services more from the suggestions, from the recommendation that we give on the design, rather than coming at the end and say that something went wrong. So the whole idea of the CA, the internal auditor, is that it needs to be more preventive. The companies would expect us to be a person come and say what may go wrong or what will go wrong. Where are we now? Rather than pointing out the flaws in the system. So that is where it gives a lot of challenges for the internal auditors to be very abreast with our learnings, taking about the technology, taking about the mobile computing, everything. Today, from the industry person who working in the audit department for so many years, I know that the challenges today is too much of information. How many of us read Internal Auditors magazine? How many of us read Chartered Accountant, Company Secretary? It is always, I have realized that it is easy to download, but difficult, taking time to upload here. That takes time. There's always a gap between download and upload. So much of information, so much of knowledge available out there, but are we understanding that? Are we interpreting in the way? And are we implementing that? There may be several standards, but standards only when you implement, actually it will be beneficial to the companies. So with that thought, I would only say, auditors have got a very great years ahead. And somebody asked, what challenges we face. The challenge is too much of information. And we have the potential to understand and give the benefit to the company. And every company, every leader, every CEO will only appreciate internal auditor and will never ask, why do I need an internal audit? Internal auditors is being required and time has already come, and many people, many companies have said internal audit is part of the company, and nobody will ask why is internal audit is required. And even at the best of the artificial intelligence will not replace. We will also be ahead of artificial intelligence and see that how do we do what flaws can be there, and how do we give information in time. So in that sense, internal auditors have got a very bright future. I am a firm believer in the professionals. So internal audit will have far-reaching implications, and after the advent of Companies Act and the professionals and also the standards, we will have a great future. Thank you very much, Mr. Venkatraman, and the audience for so many good questions. As a matter of love and affection, I have a small memento.
Thank you very much, sir. It is a very honor and enthralling to hear our first speaker, T. Venkatraman, and we would like to show our gratitude for his contribution. I request our C.R. Kumar sir to come forward to adorn a shawl for T. Venkatraman, and I request Ramakrishna Ramakoteswar Rao, head of internal audit, ITC Guntur, to come forward to present a memento to Mr. T.V. Venkatraman. I request Mr. Venkatesan Sundaram Finance to join in the honor. We are moving forward for we are going for that inaugural session. We request Ms. Sally Clare, Global Head Internal Audit Berkeley, who is very kind enough to grace this occasion, to come on the dais, please. I request our Central Council member and Chairperson, Continuing Professional Education, Sri Priya Kumar, to come and join the dais, and Vidyadhar, a member who is instrumental in coordinating this entire program. I request him to join the dais. I hand over the proceedings to Sri Priya Kumar, our Chairman CPE Committee. We would like to present a bouquet as a welcome measure, bouquet and a shawl to our chief guest for this national conference, Ms. Sally Clark, Global Head Internal Audit at Berkeley. I request Sri Priya Madam to do the honors. Thank you. Over to Sri Priya Madam, please.
Could I please request Sally to light this lamp for us before we commence?
So you take the camera and you light the wick on the big lamp there. So you have the lamp there, so you give it the camera and take care of the camera.
Miss Sally Clark from Barclays, C.A. Vidyadharan sir, who's been absolutely sort of staccato performance on this seminar, and I'll come to it later. Ladies and gentlemen, and our other speakers, Bhavani, Venkateshan sir, here's a very, very hearty good morning to all of you. And welcome once again to this No Risk, No Reward, which is both with KNOW, to this National Conference on Internal Audit. And I hope you enjoyed the first session. Sally was actually in India on a business trip, and Mr. Vidyadharan actually suggested that we have this program here today. Our original thought was, as usual, to have it on a Saturday. So I said, sir, Monday crowds. He said, no, don't worry. We'll make the topics very good, so people will come, whether it's Monday, Tuesday, sunshine or rainfall. And so here we are. And I must also tell you this, that normally an internal audit conference in SIRC does not get more than 100 people. So frankly, at 100, I even stopped trying. I said, oh, we've hit the target. But I'm very happy to let you know that we have about 200 registrations for this program. So the credit goes to you. Thank you very much for being here today. The normal protocol is always to do a vote of thanks at the end, where we list out a whole list, an itemized schedule of people we'd like to thank. But I'd like to make a small deviation here. I'd like to place on record my most sincere appreciation of the efforts taken by this one gentleman you see on stage here today. From the word go, he helped us find the speakers, had to do the scheduling, and also helped us to actually circulate this information amongst the members of the Institute of Internal Auditors. While we can't co-brand our events with other bodies, I'm also very thankful to the IAA team for having made this conference possible and successful. Thank you very much. In terms of my own little speech here today, in fact, I feel very guilty taking your time because you have much better speakers. But I thought I'll share maybe just 6 perspectives with you, which would perhaps help you to understand the tone of this conference or your key takeaways better. Number one, which I had already mentioned to you, is there are 2 interesting things about this program. We've commenced a webcast of this program, so it's going to be recorded for posterity, and it will be put up on ICI TV. So whoever you want to see this program at a later date, the links will be circulated. And the CPE committee is actually attempting to find all such good programs and get them mandatorily webcast in the future. Don't know the numbers, but I'm sure not less than 1,000, 1,500 people are watching this event. Secondly, we've implemented something called as the ICE for the CPE committee starting today. We're testing with this conference. You would have seen another slide which will be put back for you. You can merely go and click a link and give your questions. And Mr. Vittal has configured some polls. It's ICAI, ICE, cpeice.org. If any of you need the link, we can share it with you. So this is a small development that we've done to actually make this CPE process more interactive. Now, coming to my own perspectives or some thoughts I wanted to share with you, my first point is, what's it that's causing internal audit and risk management to suddenly become hot in India? Well, I think the paramount reason was the Companies Act 2013. Very few legislations in world history are proactive. Most are reactive to a way a civil society behaved or misbehaved in a particular context. And this Companies Act 2013 is no exception. From being an act as in a noun or a book or even a verb, this act moved us to a couple of adjectives. The adjectives being accountability, corporate trusteeship, and transparency. And these three are the buzzwords in this act, which actually breathes and lives corporate governance. And what better foundation for corporate governance than a rock-solid underpinning of internal controls. Now, this act made a lot of things very relevant. It brought in a whole scheme of independent directors who were otherwise required only for listed companies. It brought in a lot of focus on the auditor, auditor's independence, auditor's rotation. It brought in auditors' liabilities for the first time in the history of the country and the history of the institute. It's bringing in NAFRA today. It's brought in section 188 related party transactions, 185 loans to directors, investments. Everything finally breathes on the need for a corporate organization, a joint stock company, to have a very strong bedrock of internal controls. Another case in point is this internal controls over financial reporting. What I see as an attempt to actually SOX-size India. What was there in the SOX is now for us as well. There have been subsequent relaxations, of course, for certain categories of enterprises in our famed Section 462 private limited company exemption notifications. But the theme is there to stay. And today I find that because of this advent of the Companies Act, and we have about 10 lakh companies in India, the statutory and the internal audit roles have somewhat blurred. Today, a statutory auditor is expected to be a bit of a forensic expert, and I use the term only bit, but and a lot more of an internal auditor. So for those of you who think this program is only for internal auditors, let me remind you that the fundamental concepts of internal audit are now becoming agnostic for any chartered accountant. Whether you're in the attest space or whether you're in a DDR or a transaction advisory space, a lot of these basics become relevant. The second thing, which I think is driving internal audit in India, is the scale of enterprises. Did any of us think a couple of years back that one Mr. Bansal would be walking away with 6,300 crores today on a sale? Welcome to this world where I think Indian enterprises are defining the new benchmark in terms of organization scale. I think that's very relevant. Very large organizations in the software space, and today enterprises in India are truly becoming global, and we hope to see the emergence of more global brands. So that's the next thing, the scale of enterprises. 3 ERPs. ERPs have become very complicated. They're virtually from you designing a system to do what it wants to do for you. Today ERPs are turning the whole schema the other way around. The ERP tells you how to do your job. So if it tells you something in a wrong fashion, then you're going to do it exactly the same way. And I'm sure a lot of people who are familiar with SAP will be able to appreciate it. When you ask somebody in an organization, why are you doing this? He says, I don't know, madam. I just press F4. I press F8. ERPs today have actually de-intelligence-sized work performance in more companies. Then, of course, you have the large-scale digitization that the whole world is talking about. You have Uberization that's happening in a big way. You have third-party dependencies. Today, nobody who makes a company wants to manufacture in-house. It's all done outside. You have third-party warehouses, you have third-party logistics service providers, you have third-party manufacturing capabilities, you have third-party people who manage your receivables, you have third parties managing your payables. Everything is 3P driven today. It brings along with it certain risks. And of course, the last compelling reasons why internal audits will be the fad is because of the scale of scams. Well, honey, it's like the scams just got bigger. Today you've got one that we're sitting on now, PNB. And I must say, PNB dramatically changed the way we ourselves did bank audits. So I think that's whether something like this was needed for all of us to sit up, and there was so much WhatsApp counseling happening on bank audits of late. Similarly, just 2 days back, the Semantic news came out. Did you know that Semantic's market cap has eroded 33% in just about $6 billion or something? Only when somebody said, look, we're going to have an internal audit to investigate certain things. I think these three things, especially in the context of India, will drive risk assurance as a service line far more than any other service lines that we've seen in the past. All these things that I spoke about bring in people risks, bring in process risks, and technology risks. And somebody would just, and our managements, our independent boards today very comfortable when the CFO comes there and tells them, oh, everything is great. One, if you're in this audience as part of the management, then yes, it's an imperative for you. But two, they also look for an external assurance, external to the function, saying, okay, my people, my process, my technology risks are handled. So this is the first perspective I wanted to share with you, and I promise the next ones will be slightly smaller. The second, what does one see as internal audit or even digitization, accounting trends in the next few years? Just want to share two little anecdotes. One personal, my son takes or used to take an Uber to class every day. So he was using a Uber for something like 60 days, and suddenly he said, look, I don't want to do Uber, I want to do Ola. So, and my son moved to Ola. 3 days after he moved to Ola, he used to get offers from Uber which were amazing. 50% off, 99 rupee rides, 59 rupee rides. That means somebody is actually watching what he's doing and saying they're seeing a pattern out of this person taking a cab and he's not coming back to us. So, very interesting. The second is, for those of you who are on the social media, there's a very popular video that's doing its rounds. There's somebody explaining how Google Maps is going to change. Today you put your Google Maps there and then it shows that little red balloon and then you're trying to find your way. And maybe some map has somewhere changed. But what they're now trying to do is they're going to come up with street signs. So today if you're reaching the CA Institute and you're at the beginning of this road, somebody is actually going to show you El Dorado, the building. They're going to show you the image of the income tax office because a human just relates to a street sign better than you relate to a little map. And it's actually going to start giving you arrows. It was an amazing video. Now, why do I mention this? Because I think what's on with the business function in terms of very high-tech automation, artificial intelligence will soon find its way into audit. And I read an article which said what are going to be the emerging trends in 2018 for digital accounting and digital audit as well. And this is what they list. They talk about blockchains, they talk about robotic process automation, they talk about cognitive intelligence, they talk about deep learning, they talk about massive cybersecurity risks and capability to handle these risks. They talk about internal audit analytics. They talk about third-party risks. I just spoke about third-party, right? They talk about third-party risks. They talk about culture risks. In fact, in today's question session, I saw one question. It says, how can internal audit change the fundamental culture of an organization? After all, a fraud is done by somebody in a moment of madness or perhaps a very well-planned fraud. So culture risks are something that's going to emerge big time. Crisis management capabilities. All these will be the internal audit watchwords for 2018. Brings us to my next perspective. So what is anybody expecting out of you as either somebody who's going to set up a control function or somebody who's part of the internal audit function or as an internal auditor? I think two things are very relevant here. People want us to move beyond the financial statement audits. Your audits have to be more operational efficiency driven. It has to be operating effectiveness driven. And what needs to be interwoven in all that is your fraud risk. Today, let's assume I'm auditing a huge paper company. Okay, all the processes of quotes, this, that, service contracts is all done. Do I take time off to check whether the paper that's getting rolled out is classified as confirming or non-confirming? Today, if somebody makes an error there and classifies it as non-confirming, it gets deep discounted at 60%. So can I collude with the supplier? Today, who is the person doing that classification? Is it an organization's own employee or is it a third-party person? In a lot of large organizations, you find that the QC process is outsourced to a team where the person gets paid 8,000 rupees a month. So these are the kind of learnings that I think we should be coming up with And looking at, and somewhere along the line in this huge stream of automation, we've sort of forgotten our first principles. Is there maker, checker? Very important. 2, rotation of jobs. Is it happening? So, while there will be an effort for this function to scale larger automated heights, it will also require us to find our own depths in our first principles more often. And the second thing is, I think, today an expectation of an internal audit function is not historical. It wants you to be ahead. You need to be able to predict on what's going to be my risk in the future and how do I mitigate that risk. So with these few perspectives, just thought I'd end with something on ethics, something that we've all been advised from the Central Council to speak about in every program. So just want to take you to 2 little stories. One a small quip and the other a story. So how many of you have read the emblem of India, the Ashoka Chakra? So we have a quiz buff, Raji, so she'll answer this one. So what does it say there? It says Satyameva Jayate, right? Great. So have you seen the emblem of the High Court? Seen the emblem? What does that say? Sally, these are our courts, the High Court and the country's emblem. Yeah. So it also says Satyameva Jayate. Have you seen the emblem of the Supreme Court? Anyone seen it? And what do the lines read in the Supreme Court emblem? It does not say Satyameva Jayate. It says Yatho Dharmo Tato Jayaha. Yatho Dharmos Tato Jayaha, which means where there is dharma, there is victory. So right from our very, very young days, we've been sort of ingrained into this, you have to do the right things. But then, why do we have audits? Why is there all this confusion? And then I found out that the answer to this lies really back in history. So I'm going to end my session with a very small quote, story from the Rig Veda. So this explains why, we're going to be there forever as a profession. So this was the Vedic times, and there was very little to do. So the Devas and the Asuras used to fight every day. For those of you who've heard this story before, apologies for the repetition. So every Monday through Saturday they would fight, and Sunday would be break day, and Monday they would announce the fixtures. This particular Monday, it was Shiva versus the Asuras. And there was Indra, who was absolutely unhappy. Indra is the king of the gods, with Shiva's growing popularity. So he says, I need to beat Shiva. How do I do it? And there's a little termite that walks along. So he calls the termite and says, hey termite, please help me to defeat Shiva. The termite is thoroughly amused and he says, boss, this is like your match fixing. Can't do. So he pleads with him, and so the termite says, okay, I'm really tiny. How can I help you? To which Indra says, very simple. When Shiva is stringing the bow, just go and bite off the string. So what happens? He can't fire his arrows. You're all listening very deeply. You can listen with a small smile because it's a funny story. So, yeah. So he says, bite off the string, and then Shiva gets defeated. So Termite says, okay, let me go think about it and come back. And some people add this, let me go ask my wife too. So maybe he asked his wife and came back. And so apparently the termite asks in Sanskrit, Ka Dakshina, which means, what will you pay me? So it's like, Indra's really surprised. He says, okay, wherever there is wood and water on this earth, you will be there. Termite says, not enough, buddy. He says, why only me? So he says, wherever there is wood and water, you will be there, and your whole tribe will be there. Which is why when you have a pest issue at home and you do a pest control, it goes to your neighbor's house and comes back. This, ladies and gentlemen, they say is the story of evolution of corruption. And what's the moral of the story? Until there is wood and water on this earth, there will be corruption. Which means until there is wood and water on this earth, people who talk about NAFRA and a diminishing role of ICA, chartered accountants, until there is wood and water on this earth, there will be statutory auditors. And for all the perspectives I spoke of till now, there would also be a huge, much larger tribe of internal auditors. And to just close out, a lot of people keep talking about professional ethics. I don't think there's anything as professional ethics. All ethics is personal. It's intimately wired between your head and your heart. And here's wishing all of you a great legacy of personal ethics, not just for yourselves, but for the people around you. Thank you very, very much, and thank you, Sally, once again for being here.
Friends, we are very eager to listen to the keynote address by the chief guest, Sally Clark. In fact, she has been touring India during the month, visited Chennai, and then she moves to Pune, Mumbai and all that. She has come all the way from London for this event, and utilizing this opportunity, we have requested her to be the chief guest for this event. Let me formally introduce her to all of you. Sally was appointed Chief Internal Auditor in July 2014. Her role is to run the 650 strong global function as it provides assurance to key stakeholders on the effectiveness of control environment at Barclays. She is passionate about helping the bank succeed through the work BIA. That means being brilliant, being impactful, and being agile. That is what meant by BIA does with the businesses and the functions, and through the continuous program of improvement within the function itself. A qualified executive coach and fellow of the Institute of Leadership and Management, Sally also mentors staff within Barclays and is the executive committee member sponsor for the well-being agenda. She also sits on the board of Institute of Internal Auditors in the UK. She has launched BIA, that is Brilliant, Impactful and Agile Vision, which is to be leaders in assurance by being brilliant, being impactful and being agile. Until February 2014, Sally was the Chief of Administration for BIA. Her responsibilities revolved around strategy for the function along with professional practices including quality assurance, training, development, BIA operations and communications. Sally joined Barclays in September 2012 from RBS, Royal Bank of Scotland, where she was Head of Operational Risk, Global Banking and Markets. In her 9 years at RBS, Sally has held various audit roles in wealth and corporate markets, along with heading up audit strategy, operations and development. Prior to this, Sally spent 18 years at JP Morgan Chase, where she became audit partner and co-head of investment banking audit of EMEA. Sally graduated from the University of East Anglia with a bachelor's in English and comparative literature, and she holds an MBA from the University of Warwick. Sally has a track record of success in developing and executing strategy, driving operational excellence and audit delivery. She lives in Hertfordshire with her husband. She has a son and a daughter and also has stepdaughters. Thank you. Now over to Sally.
So good morning everybody, and it's a great honour to be with you all today and to open your event. First time I've ever had to do that, so it's fantastic. And yeah, if you added up all those years, I think you'd come to the conclusion I'm very old. So that's the start point. And yeah, and my children, which remain very important to me. I've left my daughter and my son at home. My daughter starts her big exams today. And we were in the car on the way here, and my son simply sent me a text saying, "Where are you?" He's 21, by the way. I think he wanted me to make him breakfast. And when I went, "Oh, I'm in Chennai," he went, "Oh, okay." So it shows you that children don't keep up with their parents anymore. So I was going to just talk a few things, a little bit about my background, and then a little bit about some of the things that we're doing in internal audit at Barclays. And we're doing with the IIA as well. And they all badged round one little hashtag that I am trying to take global. So this is my takeaway for you guys today. And if you could use it whenever you tweet or go on any social media talking about internal audit, I will be forever in your debt. And that hashtag is internal audit is cool. And we don't necessarily project a brand to the outside world of being cool. In fact, most people, I think we're very boring and that we're very grey and not particularly colourful, and that we are boring people that you wouldn't want to talk to at a dinner party. And I do have to say, if I ask anyone in the audience, did you grow up wanting to be an internal auditor, and you put your hand up, I think it must be no more than 1 or 2 people here. So let me test it. Did anyone as a child want to be an internal auditor? I don't believe you. So having fallen into it, I actually fell into my career through a little advertisement that was given away in one of these free newspapers that they hand around in London. And it said, graduates wanted for international travel. And I had a degree in English literature, and I thought, well, international travel sounds a pretty good thing to go and do. And they said, well, it's internal audit. And I said, okay, I have no idea what that is, but I'll go along and take a look. And the first question I was asked was, do you have common sense? And I said, well, I think my mother taught me how to sew, and she taught me how to change a plug so that I could do things, and in fact I can change a tyre on a car if I break down. So yeah, I think I could start out by saying I have common sense. And the person who was interviewing me said, well, to be honest, that's going to stand you in greater stead than almost anything for your career. So great, you'll be a fine internal auditor. And there began my career. And I then spent 18 years at JP Morgan Chase, auditing within the bank, mostly what at the time was a new market, which was known as derivatives. So there weren't many of them around, and I audited them in the early days. And I did 3 years when I was at Chase, training the Federal Reserve Bank in how to look at these instruments, and then was tempted away by my sort of second passion, other than the internal audit is cool, which is people, to go to the Royal Bank of Scotland and to spend a bit of time there trying to improve their people organisation within their audit function, and put in place strategies for keeping people inside the audit function, because they had lots of people leaving. And that's one of the things I've kept with me throughout the rest of my career. Internal audit at RBS was an interesting time to be there. For those of you that think about the timescale from 2003 to 2012, it kind of incorporated a little thing that happened in 2007 and 8 known as the financial crisis. And at the time, RBS was pretty much at the epicenter of it in the UK. So it was a really interesting place to be looking at the lessons that were learned as a result of it, and thinking carefully about what did it mean for internal audit. And one of the questions that we certainly asked at the time was, where was internal audit, and how come when you look through all the papers and all the online stories about that crisis, it's almost impossible to find anything written about internal audit. At the time, I think we all sighed this big breath of relief, thinking that it meant that we weren't doing anything wrong. And I think over time since then, we've come to the realisation that wasn't the right way to think about things. The reason we weren't in the papers back then was because we weren't seen as relevant. And so one of the big things that I think again has come out, and the last few years I've seen a real step change, certainly in the UK, and from listening to speakers this morning, it sounds like that step change is happening here as well. One of the key things is internal audit is not just cool, it's actually also extremely relevant nowadays. So my experience at RBS was instrumental in how to think about having a vibrant, dynamic audit function. And I was very lucky. My boss from JP Morgan phoned me up one day and said, I've just started a new role at Barclays, would you like to come and have some fun? And so I thought, okay, well, internal audit, there we go. There's another new adjective for it. Let's have fun in internal audit. So I went off to Barclays and spent a couple of years supporting my boss. And it's interesting, again, looking out at the crowd here this morning, I don't think it would look hugely different in terms of dynamics in the UK either. Being a woman, I looked at the job spec when the new role came up, and I thought, well, It says there's at least 10 things I need to be able to do, and I can't do all 10 of them perfectly, so I'm really not sure I should be putting my hat in the ring for this one. Lesson to women: men don't think like that. They would look at that list of 10, see 3 things they could do averagely well and just go for it. Women are dreadful at doing this, so everywhere I go, one of the things I promise to always talk about is making sure that women go for every opportunity that comes their way. A few people in the audit function said to me, if you don't go for that top job, we could have some monster from the outside come in and be our new boss, so please do go for it. And I did. I had lots of advice from the men around me on what to wear for my interviews, which I started off taking and then at the last minute decided not to. I thought if they want to have the authentic me running this audit function, then it had better be the authentic me that goes into the interviews. And so I threw on my leopard print shoes and went to my interview and got the job. And 4 years later, here I am. It's been a roller coaster in terms of the outside world, but it's been an absolute joy throughout. One of the things that people on the inside of internal audit realise is this is a really fantastic profession to be in. We get opportunities that people simply don't get when they're in the line. So we have opportunities for influence because of not just the fact that the position that we have in the organisation of independence and objectivity, but also because we nowadays train people in how to communicate and how to influence stakeholders in such a way that our advice and our opinion is actually wanted, not just offered from the outside. And I think it's something that we kind of continually need to go out and talk about and be proud to make sure that other people are seeing. And one of the things I try very hard to do is bring people from outside the profession into it. So we look not just for our internal audit function to other internal audit functions in the market, but to try and bring people in nowadays who have got backgrounds in operations or technology or risk, and some of the things that require increasing subject matter expertise. So in terms of thinking about some of the risks that are facing us, and I thought I'd just touch on them, and I'm sure they are ones that are probably echoes of earlier speakers and will no doubt come back through the course of your day here. One of the things that I was going to talk about was digitalisation, which certainly in banks is becoming one of the key, if you like, risks, but also opportunities for where we take banking. So whether that's in our electronic banking capabilities in our trading rooms, or whether that's through now opportunities to open up banking using APIs, so that when you're looking for a house and you look online and you see a house that you rather fancy going to see, your APIs work such that your bank can pop up in front of you and tell you whether or not they're likely to give you a mortgage so that you can afford to buy it. So the risks that come out through this sort of new world are twofold. One, for us internally in audit, how do we make sure our people have the skill sets to be able to understand those new risks and audit them? But also actually kind of a little bit more existentially from within banking, how do I as the head of audit make sure I keep the people who are working here in a bank when the outside world of fintech looms large and is likely to tempt some of my younger auditors away. So I look at it at two sides. From the perspective of the changing shape of the organisations, and I'd echo the third party, the increasing use of outsourced providers and third-party providers means our organisations' perimeters have completely changed shape. And what used to be done within the four walls of the bank are now done within the world of all of our outside providers and our service providers. And that makes a difference to us in a number of ways. One, data, and we are truly facing GDPR this year. So is our data safe, and is our data being looked after by those third parties? And secondly, the perimeter that used to be the bank, through which people could try and get into the bank if they wanted to hack in, is now a much wider perimeter. And so the cyber security that we need to be cognizant of and be looking at isn't just our own, but it's also that of that extended perimeter. We have increasing amounts of regulation, and just trying to keep up with all of that regulation, what it means for us, is a constant thing that we're looking at. And I would echo, in terms of looking at culture, the importance now of culture. And certainly within the UK, the IIA published their FS code. And so for financial services firms, one of the things that we're required to do is to look at how do we audit culture, and to try and come up with a report that we send into the board every year on the culture of Barclays and what we see that needs to be changed and what we think is working well. The recent collapse in the UK of Carillion, a company there that had kind of all sorts of conversations with third parties, etc., and service provision as well, has meant that the IIA is now looking at its response to that collapse and may well come out with a code that extends far wider than the financial services industry, but will actually tap in there to some of the benefits that we've seen coming out of the FS code in terms of looking at culture. What does it mean for the key skills we're looking at? Well, I am constantly on the recruitment path. Last year we actually hired over 200 people into our audit function, so we're 650 strong with 1/3 of those people having joined in the last year, which, if you think about it, is an enormous change for us as a team, and a need for us to kind of make sure that we're really focused on keeping the team together. So we are looking for people who bring an appetite for change. Traditionally, auditors have not been known as great change agents or great lovers of change. In fact, traditionally they have been they form a group of people that I call sort of introverted analytical people, okay? They love detail. What they don't necessarily like is change. And one of the things we're having to try and do is get our organisation of 650 motoring in a change way. They need to understand technology in a way that we never had to in the past. So our response to that in Barclays has been to put together a programme for this year of something every single month. And when you went through blockchain and artificial intelligence and RPA, all of those are now topics that we've put as part of the mandatory training for the team. They need to understand data. Data is probably our biggest enemy and our best friend at the same time. And the state of data in most banks is fairly parlous. We don't know where things are. We haven't categorised them as being important in the past, and we haven't looked after it carefully enough. So trying to understand data and to understand how to make sure that we are auditing data through both traditional and through more advanced mechanisms is definitely something that's on our agenda. One of the ways that we at Barclays looked to try and change the culture of the organisation was to try and ensure that risk and control moved into the first line as being something that the first line felt accountable for. And I'll just share with you one of the things that we did to do that. So we do our audits, we write our audit reports, and we give them ratings. The ratings are twofold at Barclays. So one is to rate the control environment, which for me is an independent snapshot of what we see the controls as being, whether they are in a satisfactory, needs improvement, or unsatisfactory state. But we've introduced a new mechanism which has been in place now for about 5 years and has certainly, I think, really influenced the culture, which is our management control approach rating. This appraises management on how good they are at being proactive at owning risk and control. So it looks at whether they understand their processes and the risks, and whether they have logged against those risks all the current failures in the controls that they have. So they've done this for themselves. Then, having identified the controls that are missing or not working, whether they're fixing them, and whether they're fixing them properly and sustainably and against a timescale that they have set for themselves. It then measures the culture of the organisation, and whether people can still put their hands up and say something isn't working here. And added into that one is when we try and close out our audit reports, that culture element factors in by whether they fight every issue that we raise. So as you might imagine, it's a bit more of a judgmental rating that we're giving. And that last little bit of do you fight every issue can sometimes be your friend as well as your enemy, because the more people fight it, the more their rating goes down. They start to realise that it's not in their best interest to fight every issue that the auditors bring up. And the last bit being governance. So, is there a strong sense of governance? And that rating has been instrumental in changing that sort of adoption of risk into the first line. For this year, our big focus is agile, but a slightly different agile than simply being nimble and fast. Agile project techniques have been around in the technology software development industry for quite a while. We are probably amongst one of the first banks, I think, where the audit function itself has taken up agile as a methodology and a way of working. For those of you that have been around as long as I have, it feels a little bit like a back to the future moment. One of the things I realised in the last couple of years was that people had lost the art of conversation. They had become so immured in technology that their day consisted of walking into the office, opening up their laptop, and then their fingers did the talking all day long. And as a funny side story, which I'll add to your one about your son, my daughter, I came home from work on a number of occasions, and these are really big exams she's taking right now. And she's sitting revising, in inverted commas. She has Netflix on her laptop. She has her mobile sitting on the side with somebody on the other end of it who she's FaceTiming apparently while she's studying. She's trying to do her homework, and she's got music playing as well. All of this is going on, and I said to her, do you not think, as the sort of echo from my own mother saying the same thing to me when I was 18, do you not think you should be in your bedroom actually without all this distraction studying? And she turned to me and said, Mum, I got 95% in the last 3 exams. If I fall below 90, maybe I'll do it your way. Right now, my way is working fine. So this is the world we're living in. And as part of that, we've lost that ability to be able to have conversations with each other. And that gives us great inefficiencies. If an auditor writes an email to someone and says, can you send me this report, and then waits 3 days before they get a response, before they get the report, it's another then 2 days before they find anything, they then write emails back. It's really interesting how we realised that people had gone away from the old-fashioned approach to auditing that I had grown up with, where A, you sat in the business to do your audits, B, you spoke to people when you had questions, and C, you discussed the issues with them, not on paper, but actually face-to-face. So some of the things that we started to do, and you can look us up, we're all over LinkedIn at the moment with our agile techniques, and there's a little network growing that's grown across the UK, spread out into the North American crowd as well, and we're hoping to make sure we bring it right across Asia through Barclays and some of the other banks that have picked it up. Is that every audit is visualised, so there are Kanban boards, and they're not allowed to be online ones, they have to be physical ones. I have never seen so many post-it notes on my walls of my office as there are in London now. And by the way, you have to buy special ultra sticky ones because they stay up there for a little while. Everything is visualised, all audits are in 2-week sprints, things get moved from to do to doing to done. We invite our stakeholders to come and stand at the boards. We don't make it a secret squirrel thing as we used to in the past. And people find that they much more quickly are able to dispose of things that they were looking at. We can stop our junior staff going off on wild goose chases, which in the past we wouldn't have even known they were doing because they'd have been off doing it on their computers. And we can actually increase our efficiency. We can get an audit report down to 3 hours instead of 10 days elapsed time if the whole team sits together to write it. So that's our massive sort of, at the moment we're a year and a half in, cultural change. It is a big cultural change because it's also changed and flattens the hierarchy that we had in the organisation, which for me is a great thing because it's meant people are empowered much more in much more junior levels than they had been in the past. But it's a journey, and it's a cultural journey, and with all these things, if you recall, I said a lot of auditors are quite averse to change. We're sort of having an issue, I think, in certain areas where people really are a bit worried about what this future looks like. We're doing data analytics. If I can do a data analytic test rather than a sample test, we will do it all the time. So the biggest sample we've tested is 47 million items, which we managed to do in a single test. We are focused very heavily on culture and looking at how we audit culture, and that one is still an experimental journey for us. I have seen everything from employing our own psychologist as an option through to again using data analytics to trawl its way around the data in the company and find for itself the cultural norms that are out there. And we're looking at both ends of the spectrum. And finally, with a great plea from my audit committee to not look at the past, we're trying very hard to have some kind of scientific crystal ball to try and work out what's the next big risk that's coming at us, and make sure that what we're doing is focusing as much on that as what's currently in place. So those are our big things for the year. It's a fantastic organisation that I work in with a fabulous group of people. Every day gives me new energy. I really enjoy it. I wish you guys well for the rest of your day, and I'm really happy to take any questions about anything that we're doing. And I was told you might be shy, so please don't be.
About 5 minutes. About 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Quick question. So what's the outcome of a low culture score in an audit? What happens? I mean, I'm looking at the consequence of having a low culture score.
So management have taken culture pretty seriously, and that MCA score actually is more important to them in some ways than the control environment, because quite often to fix the control environment you need to invest in technology, and you have these 2 or 3 year fixes. You can change that culture element very quickly through attitude. So because it's a measure of attitude, it has been used at year end when we look at bonus calculations. So if you have an unsatisfactory score, for a number of audits that have been done in your area, then questions get asked. If you have an unsatisfactory culture score, you have to come and explain to the audit committee how come you had that and what are you doing about it. So it gets prevalent, so people don't want it. But it really has had that sounds very much like a stick. It's actually had a big carrot type impact on the company, because it's made people think about risk and control. When I got there 5 years ago and started talking about risk and control with people in the first line, I might as well have been speaking Russian for all that they understood about what it meant. It really, really is different today. It's fantastic to see first-line people thinking about risk and control when they're thinking about new products or new developments that they want to do. So it has had that big change, but there is a sort of stick at the back end as well that helps.
Quick question here. So did you have to socialize this cultural audit with HR, or was this a mandate from the board? How did you actually get started on this review?
Okay, so putting in place this new kind of approach from a rating perspective, we socialised it with everybody at the executive level, because it was going to mean a big change. People at the top tend to be very supportive of this, because they can see it's a good way for them to get information about what's going on in their own departments that are several levels below them. It doesn't always feel quite so comfortable for the people who are having the audit done, and I've got some of my auditors here, they're nodding away, and so sometimes that can be more problematic, because clearly it's much more personal when it's my department that's being audited. But the board were very, very supportive, and we did tell them that it would be less scientific, more judgment-based, but as far as I'm concerned, we are employed for our judgment more than our ability to tick and bash things. And so from that perspective, it went down, the board love it, and they've told me whatever we do, don't make it too scientific. Keep that judgment in there, because that's what's valuable.
I guess I'm also from the same generation as you. I have seen the past, I have seen the present, and I'm earnestly looking forward to looking at the future. Now, today's people, I feel that they are very comfortable replying on a mail, because they find a certain degree of anonymity when they are answering questions. I feel that there's every possibility that they might feel threatened when you're actually physically in front of them and asking them to give replies to their queries, because it may appear as though you're intruding into their space. Now, how did you get over that when you were talking about the cultural part of it?
Sure. So actually, I think it's the people in the middle sandwich level who are the most uncomfortable with it. The new joiners, and we take on graduates and apprentices who are in their kind of early 20s or late teens, early 20s, and they have loved this approach. It's as if we've introduced them to conversation, human being-wise, for the first time in their lives. So they're champing at the bit with it. They're not worried at all. And in fact, one of the good things, we require this visualization of every audit and a stand-up every day at it for 15 minutes. So as a junior person, you get a chance to be speaking to a senior person every day, 15 minutes. And so the value of that is that your views are important and that they count. So actually we found it okay. I think we're finding more of a struggle at the mid-levels where they're having to kind of give up a few things in order to be able to manage to do this. It's an interesting thing. One of the agile principles that I learned early days, and it was quite distressing to me, was that multitasking is a really bad thing. Yes. Being a woman, I kind of felt like it was a really good thing to be able to run around and do 20 things at once. It's a really bad thing. So one of the things that this has done is it concentrates down what you do. And some people equate seniority with having multiple things going on. So we're having to kind of rewrite that and say, no, you become a master at just this one thing at a time, and then move on to the next thing. So it's interesting. It's not proven a problem at all. The stakeholders haven't appeared on every board every day, and I'm trying to work out whether that's the auditors not inviting them, in which case I'll get cross, or if it's them not coming, in which case I'll kind of be doing some other communication. But it's early days, but it's a fantastic journey to go on, and I'm really enjoying it. And the team, in principle, are all joined up to it, and in practice we're getting there slowly.
So I think
last question. I think I'm allowed.
Yeah, last question.
I think very glad to hear something on the culture audit part of it, and just want to understand a little bit better in terms of what are some of the parameters or some of the areas where the cultural alignment or misalignment is being measured on, and how different is it from several other behavioral assessments that we otherwise run in an organization. So if you can just throw a bit more light into what exactly is measured, or how
Sure.
the alignment is actually accounted for.
So two different things then. So our MCA rating that we have, which is Management Control Approach, which measures their kind of risk culture. If you think about it, it's a proxy for risk culture. That's got quite a lot of objective measures you can use. So we encourage management to raise their own issues. So what proportion of issues are they raising versus what we're raising? We encourage them to close them on time and not to be too ambitious or too long distance in their action plan date. So how many overdue issues do they have where they haven't managed to make their kind of responses on time? The culture bit about can people raise their hands is done by just people observing it when they're in and about the business. It's more difficult, or they might have people where they'll ask the question. We did try using surveys, and it didn't work so well at the beginning of an audit. It didn't help us, but we're experimenting all the time. When it comes to the broader culture audits, one of the things that the company's done is put in place some dashboards with key indicators on them. So that looks at how many people are off with stress, what's our turnover rates, are people answering questions about their management not being, supportive of them, etc. So there's a bunch of those things, but we also look at complaints about the firm that are coming in from the outside. So there's a whole dashboard there. So we will look partly at that dashboard. And the thing we're just trying to work out is I'm really convinced that there's something about this artificial intelligence-led approach to culture measurement, letting a robot come up with the themes it's seeing, not even needing to give it a hypothesis, just letting it loose. Now, I sound like that should be easy. I'm sure it's not, but we are starting to talk about it, and we're doing some work. And Deloitte's have got a prototype that they've been using, so we've been talking to them. The psychologist end is an interesting one as to whether you use behavioural psychologists. In those instances, typically people use surveys and then they send in. So Royal Bank of Scotland has 2 psychologists that they use inside the audit function to go and then follow up on these surveys with questions and interviews. Out of that has come a sense of whether things are working well or not. Now, we've just done a great piece of work in Asia where we looked at expenses. We did come up with hypotheses. If you're allowed to claim taxis and food if you work later than 9 p.m, so then there's an assumption you're working till 9 p.m. So we correlated people's expense claims with their access card batting in and out of the building. Found people leaving at 6 but claiming the late stuff. So you can deduct some things around a culture where people are willing to do that. And we're doing a lot of work on, again, on ethics and culture. Why do good people do bad things? And so trying to understand why do people do that, you quite often find there's a correlation then with they didn't get the pay rise, so they're getting it back in their expenses. So there are, things like that. So using analytics to seek out those kinds of hypotheses and then test against it. People shouldn't be upgrading their airfares. How many people have done that? And then we're looking into why. So that's the kind of thing we've done, kind of both ends of on a V audit and then at the broader end.
Thank you, Sally. It was an insightful speech. What I could understand from her whole speech is that she said it's an absolute joy for her to be an internal auditor. That's what she referred it. And it's a fantastic profession, she said. Also, she said the internal audit profession is extremely relevant. Even when closing remarks was being given by Mr. H. Venkatesan in the first technical session, he said internal audit is a very relevant profession. It has to be there, and no one will ask you why there is internal auditor. Without internal auditor, can you go along like that? And extremely important thing she emphasized is the common sense is required for anybody, and more so for internal auditor. And now I invite Sri Priya to give her closing remarks and vote of thanks.
Thank you very, very much, Sally, for those very nice words. Super mom, super auditor, and we love the way she carries herself. We actually expected you to land up in leopard print tiptoes, but the sari was great, and she looks like she could actually run in one. So it's so much about being global and thinking local. Thanks very much, Sally, and thanks for being here. And I think one of the key things that sort of set me thinking from her speech was something like this. Does somebody who commit a small travel expense, let's not use the term fraud, but let's also use the term fraud, does it necessarily mean that same behavior will get extrapolated to larger transactions? That's a very scary proposition. I would like to think, like an errant school kid making a mistake. Should I necessarily extrapolate it to the function that he's doing? And if you look at these large FMCGs, I'm sure these travel issues keep coming up almost every day. So where do you draw the line? So this is going to be one thing that you can sort of put your minds to in. And how should the board react to something like this? Because if you're talking about cultural assessments and you're talking about personal ethics, if I'm willing to do this, would I be willing to do more? More often than ever, not, but leaves an open question. So thank you very, very much once again, and request Sri Vidyadharan to please present Sally with a memento, a very small token of our appreciation for having been here today. And may I request you to please put your hands together for Sally. We'll make a short tea break now and reconvene back after this for the next session.
What time you do it? So we have to have it at 12:30.
Yeah, I used to work in the UK for many years. So I think I kind of know some of the people in your team as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Audit is cool. That's their blog now, right? So I know the area.
People are waiting there.
Yeah, I've heard about it a little. I can submit my answer. Will blockchain and new technologies make audit redundant? No, I believe human intuition drives audit. I'm answering. How much do you think AI will impact? I really don't know, but everybody says a lot, so I'm marking a lot. Will automation impair GST practice? No, we've spent a lot of time, so I hope not. So, how will robotics impact the auditor's evaluation? Actually, the one more choice should have been there. I don't know, but let's say moderate impact. I submit. And once we go into Mr. Vittal's login, you get the answer to all these polls. I think about 100 people or so may have taken these polls. And this is where I request Mr. Vittal to start. So you can, as he's speaking, you can take it. And at the end of the session, Mr. Vittal can go and see what questions he's received. So if you see here, these are Mr. Vittal's questions. We're being told that audit will be irrelevant because of digitization. Is it true? Is CAT necessary for internal audit? So kindly be informed that this is actually on testing mode for today. We've not yet launched it, but this is the only conference where we're using it. So it will be good if you can help.
Every time I'm supposed to feed in the event number, which I forget here.
No. See, the problem is it's 54732. So we'll put this slide for you so that we'll remember all the time. These are actually ideally supposed to be done ahead of the conference. The questions come in ahead of the conference when you're at home, and the polls are taken during the conference.
Hi, actually I uploaded a few questions which included the earlier session as well. So how would that get addressed generally? The questions which we post before the...
Yeah, so ideally the faculty before coming for the session will log into his ICE ID. He will take all the questions and attempt to answer them. So this is one way of trying to make sure that we get a member to connect to the CPE. So you got a question and you pumped it in, then you come to the CPE expecting your question will be answered. So this is actually...
I mean, the first session I have already posted the question.
Yeah, we have not yet put it to use because we also had a timing constraint today.
Sure.
So this we are actually testing on a version only. So may I kindly request the speaker and the chairman of the current session on information technology. We have CA AR Parthasarathi, who's going to be the session chairman. Partha is a practicing chartered accountant and very much in the internal audit space. May I also request you to please put your hands together for CA Vittal Raj. This is like our Rajinikanth of IT. So there are so few people who know. So we sort of end up calling him, and it's always been a thunderous response to his events. So here's a very, very hearty welcome to Sri Vitta. So I let the proceedings be taken over by the chairman of the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shripriya. Good afternoon to all. As we are running short of time, I will straight away go into the introduction of the speaker for the session. The session is on imperatives on emerging technologies in today's audit world. Mr. Vittal will also talk about the poll that Shripriya mentioned and the poll results and the interpretation of that as part of his coverage. I'll briefly introduce Mr. Vittal Raj, though most of you would know him. Vittal is a risk assurance and consulting expert and a trainer with over 25 years of experience working with clients in various industry segments. He's a FCA, CISA, CAA, CASSP, CGEIT, CISM, CRISC, CFE and accredited COVID-5 expert. He's also a member on RBI Standing Committee on Cybersecurity and IT Examination and a member of the REBIT Cybersecurity Assessment Framework Study Group. He's also a member and cybersecurity SME of the ICAI Technical Group on Internal and Concurrent Audit of Investment Function of Insurance Companies. He is presently a member of the International Finance Committee of ISACA International, an advisor of ISACA India Growth Initiative. He's earlier served as for 2 terms as the International Vice President and Director of the International Board of ISACA, as well as the member of ISACA International Audit Committee. He was awarded the President's Award and the Certificate of Appreciation for outstanding contributions during his term as Director for the ISACA International Board. We are happy to have Mr. Vittal here amongst us, and I invite Mr. Vittal to share his perspectives on the topics mentioned today. Thank you.
Good afternoon to you all. Good afternoon. Thank you. That kind of introduction, even I am looking forward to the speaker speaking here. I don't know, Rajinikanth comparison today really works. But anyway, I would take it as a compliment. I think this is a wonderful initiative. These initiatives are so popular in most of the universities and institutes today. I'm so glad that we are seeing this happening in our institute as well. I'd urge you to take a shot at it, because at least it gives a sense of where our thinking is going, and that would help frame the programs as well. So I possibly will need some handholding to really get across to my page, but I believe, okay, I think I'll come back to that a little later. Okay. So I think the topic really is on technology and where the audit profession, or the internal audit profession, is going. How many of you have thought about what you're going to do in 2020? Just 2 years away. Yeah? Only one? Two. Okay. Three. Not much will change, don't worry. 2025, we don't know. Because the way that things are going, I think we could see a significant shift in the way that business runs today. I'm sure all of us, we see the kind of business models evolving around us. When you really get into an audit, I'm sure we find that many times if we are adamant to stick to our old ways of doing things, we only land up with incompetence. So I think it's time that we started really looking at saying, okay, will I still remain relevant? Now, I always take this one of my very popular quotes from Paul Valery. He says, the trouble with our times is the future is not what it used to be. Left hand side, you see what is that? Yeah? Ford. Exactly. The first motor car from Ford. Would you buy that today? It costs a fortune. No, it is there. Some of them are there. It costs a fortune. Right? Only thing is you can't ride it on the road. If you do that, you know what. The right hand side is what is going to be the concept car which was introduced last year and which is going to be on the streets by 2020. As you would imagine, it's an autonomous car. I'm sure we have all been bombarded with a lot of WhatsApps and Facebooks on the emerging tech. And if you really look at the autonomous car, fortunately, unfortunately, our country has a policy wherein we are not going to encourage autonomous cars. Otherwise, imagine the number of drivers going out of jobs. It's going to be pretty sad. So, how long can we hold on to saying no to autonomous cars? Bombay is already looking at importing some of them. So, if you are a very ardent customer, they would get one for you. Where you will run it, that's a problem. Because the RTO would not permit you to give you a license for an autonomous car. License to whom is the big question. So, couple of things have been happening a lot in the last year. I'm sure you know what is this, right? You would have got a WhatsApp or whatever on this. Anybody? Yes, sir?
Yeah, in the last month I saw a WhatsApp where many people have tried this as a president.
Exactly.
And they are introducing a tax.
You're very right. In fact, this is the two-seater drone. Is going to be the air taxi in Dubai coming next June. That's what they are planning. The test trials, everything is already on. Not only that, the police force in Dubai already are experimenting with this. I don't know if you read the recent report. Uber is manufacturing a whole lot of such drones. So you can just book a drone, to go wherever you want. Only thing, you'll go to the rooftop, not to the road. That's where the parking is. It'll solve a parking problem also. And you know the kind of experience. Can you imagine the drone experience? There are a lot of YouTube videos. I encourage you to see that. I'm sure you can understand what it will be like, right? Now it's a single-seater drone. You have all the fun by yourself. 2-seaters, of course you can take your wife along or whosoever, right? So you can say I was in the clouds. Anybody recognizes this? This is pretty popular, right? Who's this person?
First
Yep.
citizen of Saudi Arabia.
First robo citizen. Yeah? So she is the first robo. I don't know how many of you had the chance to see her interview on YouTube. Anybody? I mean, if that becomes reality, which is going to become reality, the person next to you have to look at him twice or her twice and see whether it's a robo or not. Right? Yesterday, day before yesterday, I think Sundar Pichai rolled out the Google Duplay, right? How many of you saw that? Yeah. So you know what it can do for you. So we really are going somewhere we don't know, into uncharted future. And of course, this we are all aware, right? How many of you have bought bitcoins and sold them maybe? It's okay, we'll not tell RBI. Even, let me be very clear, Bitcoin is not illegal in India. It is only not legal. No, there's a difference, seriously. So, otherwise how will we have so many Bitcoin exchanges, which are Indian exchanges, still working here? In fact, many of them have filed a suit in Delhi High Court to say how can RBI issue this kind of statement? Because the total market capitalization is 12.73 lakh crores as of last December, which is the market capitalization of TCS and Infosys put together. That's only Bitcoin India market capitalization. So a lot of people have their investments in Bitcoin. I don't think you'll do a mistake if you really go and buy Bitcoin today. Of course, you decide what you do, whether you get it later or not. So, quick questions around these. How emerging tech is disrupting businesses. I mean, we can go on speaking on this topic for a whole day because there is so much happening around. Just pick a few and only pick a few perspectives on that. The bigger questions is, as chartered accountants, as accounting professionals, as internal auditors, you know, GRC is what really kind of catches our fancy. And we are bothered if something is, you know, redefining itself in these dimensions, so we look at that. But most importantly, I think it is very important for us now to see how will the professional landscape really pan out in the coming couple of years, because if so much is happening around us, so it's important that we take stock of, you know, what about the CAs and the future. Now, fundamental question, how valuable are the CAs to the society? Any idea? What are the most popular services we have? Taxation, audits, statutory audit, GST. Yes, ma'am? Financial consulting. Okay. Valuations. Sorry, sir? Paying tax on behalf of the client. Okay. Yeah, we have that. Many of the chartered accountants do that service. Filing IT returns. Right? What is the value we deliver, not in our eyes, in the eyes of the customer? How much do they treat us as valuable? See, you go to the doctor. How valuable is a doctor?
Depends on the sickness, invaluable.
Invaluable, right? Whatever he says, that is like God coming and talking to you till you meet the next God. Right? Chartered accountants, where do we stand?
Only when you have a problem.
Only when?
You have a problem.
You are a problem or you have a problem? Oh, okay. Okay. Yes, sir?
Tax compliance.
Tax compliance. So how valuable are we on a scale of 0 to 10? 10 being obviously the best. 3? What confidence, huh? Wonderful. But I do not disagree with you. It's not that everybody is doing the same kind of work. All of us do different things. But then when we look at our population as such and where our focus is now and where we need to be is where we need to see that. So the question always is, If the society doesn't see us as valuable, I think we better change profession, isn't it? 2 out of 100 pass. With great difficulty you somehow get through this examination. And then you will be treated like this, it doesn't really make sense, isn't it? There's something absolutely skewed about this equation. But is that so? It's not so, isn't it? As chartered accountants, the way we think, guaranteed very few professionals would think. Agreed or not? I'm being in the good and the bad part. Yes? So, the question is, let us put all this in context and see where we are going, and then possibly take a stock at the end of this. I'm not going to throw up any suggestions here, but it's more of raising questions is what's my job. So that we think together and see, where are we headed to? What is it that we have to do? Are we doing what we are supposed to do? So let's take this. These Gartner's, popular, they come up with every year trends of what's going to happen, and the 2018 trends have been a marked, deviation from how they published the earlier trends. They are saying the entire world is getting into intelligent digital mesh. You understand what it is, right? So it is a mesh, electronic mesh, right? It's intelligent, that's the whole problem, right? And this was all released last 2017 December. And it's all turning out to be true. And if you really see what's intelligent, artificial intelligence, I think you are hearing everywhere. China is has allocated 30 billion US dollars just for artificial intelligence. And there is a 2 billion city which is going to come up, which is the artificial intelligence city. Like financial capital, they have an AI capital. The government in India is also asking everybody to see, can you do something about AI? There is a fund allocated, but I think certainly we have a long way to go. If you really look at IoT is certainly becoming the thing. Your AC now talks to you, yes? So slowly everything will start talking to you except your wife or husband. So that's what is becoming of these intelligent things as we see. Then there is the digital, which is, if you really get into each of those immersive experience or augmented reality and how all this is panning out, it's little kind of confusing us more, isn't it? There are too many options and too many things happening. We don't want to believe half the things. But even the first experience of Ola was something of an experience for you, yes or no? Imagine, black and white taxis is what we know, black and yellow, right? There's nothing called as a taxi beyond that except you had a cab. And then came Ola and, everybody is off the scene now. Ola and Ubers have taken over the way. And today, what do we do? See, this is where they have changed our very dimension of thinking. Ages ago, when you had to take a copy of another paper, what was it called? So the dictionary word is photocopy. Xerox is name of the company, right? So today you don't find anything on internet. What do? You Google it, isn't it? You go to your next gen and you tell them find on internet. They don't even understand what you're trying to tell them. Na Google pannama. Right? Today, do you want to book a taxi? What do you say? Ola, no? You kind of completely, they have made sure that the branding and the concept has been so much brainwashed on us that we've forgotten what the original concept was or what it was called. So all that is happening across. Blockchain is kind of, everybody sees Alice in Wonderland there. We don't know what's going to happen. Much of it is true, much of it seems to be true. But one thing is there, as we look around, even in our own country, there's tremendous things happening right across every industry in the way these technologies are impacting. Obviously, I don't want to take the time to go into each and every one of them. The simplest experience, what do you call today online shopping? Flipkart, isn't it? Flipkart. At least that was one Indian company we was proud of. That's no more Indian company. That's also gone. Okay? So, if you really look at it, the concept of Flipkart was nothing new, isn't it? But they were able to brand it and put the Indian psyche into it and make somehow people get on to the idea, right? They knew that you announce anything as 10% discount, will be there, isn't it? They knew that. So they exploited that weakness, and only thing is they landed up with somewhat 1,400 crore losses. What is it? I don't know. 14,000. I don't figure. Because the guy who bought it, don't know why he bought it. Walmart. SoftBank is in trouble now because income tax department is behind them, right? And for their share of whatever. So if you really look across, each of them is undergoing a significant transformation. Traditionally, land surveys, I don't know anybody has been part of land survey audits. It is a very difficult job, isn't it? These guys with those, whatever, and the tapes and all, they'll go in the hot sun and do whatever. Today, how do they do land surveys? Drones. Completely drones, right? And it is precise, accurate, and it goes by GPS. So you have absolute mapping right across to your, both to the satellite mapping as well as your land mapping. So it is completely redefining many things, right? So we are into the Industrial Revolution 4. It was quite interesting to see that in the poll, many of us had not yet heard about the 4th revolution. How many of you heard about the 4th revolution? Only a couple of them. You know that we are into the 4th revolution now? The 4th Industrial Revolution. The first one, what was it popular for? Steam engine, right? Second one, electricity, right? Third, computers and the internet. Fourth, today is what they call as the cyber and the physical marrying each other. So like you take the drone. The drone is a lot of an information technology, yet it's physical. The autonomous car is a lot about the physical, yet it is digital. Okay? So we're going to see this happen in every space. You remember those good old days when we looked at a washing machine and it said fuzzy logic, right? We didn't understand what is to do logic with a washing machine, isn't it? Then we understood, what it means is that the day your warranty expires, next day it will not work. Well, one of them did like that, but of course it has a much larger connotation. So let us look at some of the top emerging tech and just take samples just to understand from our perspective. So first let us take what they are doing to us. Lot of them, I'm just taking a couple of them which are high impacting. How many of you have heard about robotic process automation? Yeah, many of them I'm sure are working on that, right, in that space. Chatbots. Yeah. So if you really see, we as India are one of the top losers because of RPA. I think you know last year, the IT industry simply shaved off 60,000 people, right? 60,000 in a year. And this year they expect it to double, which means twice the people will lose the jobs. Why? They have taken to RPA and machine learning. So what does it do that was not happening earlier? For example, a call center. It can recognize it, translate it into text, put it into the database, churn it around for whatever program results, bring it onto an email which is customized to you and send it out. This was actually done earlier by 4 people. So the entire chain is lost now. Multiply 4 into whatever volumes were handled. I mean, you saw how Google Duplay worked yesterday, right? I'm sure all of you saw that. You should, I think. You should go to YouTube and just say Google Duplay and you will see that. I mean, what's going to happen in the future for a chartered accountant meeting a client and asking how much, madam was saying financial consulting. Many of the financial consulting decisions, barring a few, are pretty straightforward if-then decisions, yes? Do you think that the artificial intelligence will not be able to do that? How many of you bought online loans which are automatically evaluated based upon the inputs that you provide and they determine this is what is your loan eligibility? Yeah? Not only CIBIL score, they ask you several questions, the software itself tells you, okay, this is online approval of loan. You know how many people lost job there? The poor fellow who collected this copy from you, right? Imagine whole lot of things, 10 days we'll come back with the result. 3 minutes you get the result now. What is your loan eligibility? So machine learning and going forward artificial intelligence, worldwide there is tremendous investments that's happening in artificial intelligence. Germany is competing with China for the kind of investment that it makes in artificial intelligence because they see that as the future power center. Of course, the next one is blockchain and cryptocurrencies. We'll talk about it. Of course, big data, advanced analytics has taken reality. So it's not something that we have to now look at and say, oh, okay, this is going to happen. The government, I don't know if you know, has a big data project. Yes. All our information is being collected. How do you think that people who are receiving these income tax notices? Unfortunately, the software has not been properly built. So they give you a notice saying that you are due to the department 0.79 paisa, therefore you shall be prosecuted, you shall be hanged. And this is for a person who is an 82-year-old. Cloud was something which was there. We are now moving the cloud to the edge, what they say, the edge computing. Internet of Things has now transformed into Internet of Everything, and that's going in one direction. Robotics and drones are going to change the way that shop floors work, the way that, what we are saying, the police working, and quite a lot of things are going to change. And ultimately smart cities, which is going to be, a huge dream project for the government of India. I don't know if you have seen any smart city yet, but there is small things happening here and there. So let's take some of them and see, evaluate them. I'm not going to go through everything here because the idea is for us to just see what the approach we should take in evaluating them. First and foremost, what is robotic process automation? As I said, it is very simple disintegrated tasks, otherwise disintegrated, like somebody calling the telephone company and saying my SIM card is not working. So if you really profile all the customer complaints, you can bunch them into, let us say, 100 categories. Yes or no? So for those 100 categories, can't I drive a very specific process sequence? That's what happens, isn't it? So once I have a process sequence and it is a predictable sequence, so it's a structured task. Who would do it better, you or the computer? Computer. Simple thing. So which means that's what it is doing here. Robotic process automation, forget about the word robotic. It is more of a misnomer. Somebody thinks there's a robo will come and sit the job. It doesn't happen like that. Robotic process automation simply means there is a software which is written which recognizes across platforms. For example, it recognizes your voice. Not only that, it is able to translate that into text and organize that into a database schema as it is already there in your system. Process it, which anyway is a normal processing once you give an input to a software. The output is then put onto an email which is crafted. See, it will be personal looking. Right? All your income tax department there is not some officer who is sitting there and writing hi Vittal Raj. No. So it's an automated process, and once that goes through, the entire sequence is driven and it learns from itself. Whatever mistakes are happening, for example, this 0.79 paisa, that will be an input for learning to the machine. So it keeps on learning, and imagine how much time do you think it can learn in? Maybe 2 years? It will look at all the vagaries and you will be building that logic into that system. Audit process, external audit. What is the maximum time, which of the tasks takes a maximum time? As a team you go there, right? Let's say large enterprise, you are auditing them. What is it that takes time? Data collection? Okay, cleaning. Good. What else? Yes, sir? Excellent. The first thing we were taught when we joined our articles, vouching. Right? And if you see the vouching, in those days it was a celebrated activity, yes or no? The senior would choose whether to give that knowledge to you on that particular day or not. Yeah? Because I remember the first day I entered, they gave me a telephone directory to Totala. And right till the end of that month, I didn't know why I was doing that. I also tried to fudge it a bit. The fellow promptly came back and said, the total. Only thing I don't need that skill. Then I understood was for totaling capability, which was anyway not required. Because my boss used to total up 7 figures at a time. And I'll be putting the calculator, he'll say, check pandigo. So, it transformed with time. That's great about my boss that day. Today, it is redundant. You go and tell this story to your grandchild, he would say, he's an idiot according to me. Go to Google, put on the mic, Google what is 426 plus 352? Will give you the answer? Yes or no? So, all this is transforming your entire vouching job, which is nothing but if-then decisions, right? It's if-then decisions. If it's an if-then decision, a structured software can do that better for you, yes or no? So, entire vouching is gone from audit, right? That's a major, see, that is how you negotiate fees with the client. No, sir, 10 per 10 naal vel sevaangu. Gone? Okay. Then what's the next thing you will do? Accounting standards. That requires intellectual. How are case laws decided today? Have you heard about this software called LexisNexis Jurix? Right? If you give the inputs, it can create the case papers for you. Yes or no? Yes. Yeah? Accounting standard after all. It's a question of just automating using machine learning and artificial intelligence. So, adum pochi. It will not go away tomorrow. But somewhere in the distant future, the part that we play would come down. Not now, certainly in the future. So if you see external audit, you will be called upon to say, please upload your digital signature. Your audit software will tell you what are the exceptions. You have to only agree, disagree with the client. Whatever you disagree will automatically become a qualification in the report. Right? One job, audit done. It's already happening in Singapore government. Earlier, where there were 20 people going for a government agency audit, one person goes today. He is given a software by the Singapore government. He just goes and runs that entire thing. It will capture everything out of that and give it to him. This is what is all the 10 things that you need to look at. And certainly it will not make an error unless the logic is wrong. So this is where we are getting into. So automated data entry, multi-system integration, repetitive tasks, process reconciliation, whatever we do today in these areas, let us caution ourselves. It's not going to be there in the near future. I mean, it's happening right across industries, if you see, insurance, hospitality. I mean, insurance and all, they are gaining so much by this. Because the application to policy automation is now almost seamless. I don't know if you heard about the insurance e-depository, like the NSDL depository. Now the insurance policy is issued electronically. So all that is completely changing the way that we look at things. In fact, we have one of the clients in life sciences. Their problem was they do field trials for various companies overseas, right? New drug is introduced, they have to go and test it in various parts of the country, give them the results back. The problem was there was a lot of fraud in this. How do they do that now? Very simple. They automated the entire process, used blockchain along with that. So you can identify the individual by latitude, longitude. You cannot fudge. Right? So, this is what is happening, I would think. Sorry. One, all these bookkeeping jobs, routine automated process is all gone. If somebody is still willing to give it to you, they love you a lot. Right? CS can at best be advisors on opportunities for RPA. This is where our entire focus has to change. Move away from mundane repetitive tasks to the design of that particular task itself. So processing and process audits, process evaluations, process design is certainly going to have a great future. Machine and artificial intelligence, as I said, I mean, you can give any numbers to it, it's growing like anything. And there are a whole lot of things which are happening. There is predictive analytics, then there is descriptive analytics, and that transforms into a lot of intelligence, then it uses machine learning, then it's crazy, to be very frank. All you need to understand is when you really look at something like a Google Do Play, can you write a program and just see yourself how much they think? Can you imagine? It handles all situations, right? And it keeps on learning. If you go into Google's documentation of Google Do Play, you will see that it is a pretty deep logic. But it works. And it learns by itself. Right? So this is what is going to happen in machine learning. So machine learning, what does it do? RPA would do the job. Say, okay, you tell it if, then, if, then, if, then, if, then. But there is a mistake. Oh, I have not considered like this 0.79 paisa notice being sent out to a 82-year-old individual. You bang the machine back and saying, what the hell are you doing? You are sending out to an 82-year-old gentleman. So it understands, oh, okay, I am not supposed to send it to an 82-year-old gentleman. Then it says, okay, it is 79 paisa. So you obviously tell them, unless it is more than this amount, you don't send it out. So once you start teaching like a kid, it starts learning. So that is what is machine learning really all about. There's lots of statistics, and this is what the Duplay, I'm sure if you have seen this. Now, if you really take this experience and imagine in the future, normal tax consulting that we do, right? If you look at a conversation with a client, how does it work generally? 80% of them are straightforward, agree or not? It is subjective, but it is straightforward, because you take this input and you analyze this section, and you say this will not work for you. In 20% of the cases, it involves multi-dimensional analysis. You have to look at, okay, you got 3 children now, okay, so what will happen to them, so who will get this asset? So when you start deep thinking like that, is it not something also artificial intelligence will learn over time? Certainly not in another 10 years, but it will learn. Because you can see that happening. So already, a lot of projects going on. For example, Walmart has already adopted ML. Any of you working on stock exchanges? No? Or securities trading? Have you heard about algo trading? Algorithmic trading. Algorithmic trading uses certain algorithms. It understands what is your investment profile, and it keeps on investing in those kind of stocks that would fit your risk appetite, and it will keep on giving a feedback to you, am I doing well? If you say no, you are not doing well, it will say, okay, do you want this kind of thing? This will give you so much of pension, this will give you so much. So it learns. After 4 or 5 interactions, it knows what you are thinking. Yes or no? So algo trading today is very popular. And that's the reason if you see in the NSE, there was a huge racket. Somebody was able to put through trades just before the start of a session, right? So these kind of things, hackers always learn first. So this ML is popular. Then, anti-money laundering, banks use tremendous amount of artificial intelligence solutions these days, like catching credit card frauds, because they can very easily identify multiple parameters with which country, where it is coming from, whether this fellow at all traveled in his life. So all that it recognizes, and it is able to immediately stop that transaction from happening, which is wonderful, isn't it? Of course, Alexa, Siri, Google Home, Dot. How many of you got any of these at home? If not, you should buy one. It's an experience. You have somebody to talk to at home. Right? Big taxation, big data and taxation, it's becoming really big, yes. Especially this government is moving one stone unturned to find out another SSC, new SSCs. How do they do that? If you see, you should go to this data.gov.in, which is a site of the Government of India, which does these big data projects. GSTN has a lot of artificial intelligence, big data and analytics as part of its scheme. That will work. After all, how much time will it take for the system to settle down? Couple of years? 2 years? Maybe? Right? Income tax is already using that. Banks are using AML. RBI uses tremendous amount of analytics these days. So, it is not something that's not happening. It is happening. Only thing we have to just keep our ears and eyes open, and this is what is the site I was saying, data.gov.in. In fact, India has a big data policy. They collect tremendous amount of data cross-department, and there is a whole lot of people who are working on, what the patterns that they need to really look at. So a lot of things are going on. I think you know that all your phone calls, whatever we talk, everything is traced, right? Everything is monitored. Do you think somebody is sitting and monitoring that? There is an artificial intelligence engine. The moment you talk about any unwanted word, it will immediately alert. Right from your latitude, longitude, what device you are using, where you are residing, catches every information that is available on the night. I think you will know that the internet knows much more about you than you. Yes or no? How many of you tried asking internet, what do you know about me? Try that. So what is going to happen is there is significant impact with quasi-intelligent jobs going out. So we saw first structured jobs going out. Now even quasi-intelligent jobs are going out. So what is going to happen? Where do we move now? We are required now, see, look at the problem of the business guy. This software suddenly comes up with, let's be the income tax department, and all senior citizens are writing to the PMO saying that I got one notice for 50 paisa, I got one notice for 25 paisa, I got one notice for 79 paisa. What is PMO going to do? They'll call up CBDT and say, what the hell is happening? Now what will they do? Now whether to trust this software or not, right? We have to remind them, chartered accountant no irukkango. If you call them, they can help you analyze this and give you assurance on that software. Application audits, application controls review is a tremendous area which is going to have extraordinary potential. Believe me. Everybody needs to know what is happening within that software. Nobody knows. Nobody knows what is happening in the core banking system. Agree or not? Even the vendor doesn't know. Seriously. So, lot of opportunities here. Blockchain crypto. I'm sure you heard about the big hangama happened on bitcoins and what the FM said, right? Only when he said, half the people knew, oh, cryptocurrency no. Right? You know how many cryptocurrencies are there in the world today? As of last November, 900 plus. India also had one there, Lakshmi coin there. It didn't really take off. That is different. But this crypto, we may say it's not going to happen. The world doesn't believe so. There are many countries which already recognized cryptocurrencies as illegal. Japan is one, Singapore partially is another. A lot of European countries recognize the crypto. So which means that it is like okay, I'm going abroad, I want to exchange dollars. No, it's not required, isn't it? You go and change it to Bitcoin. You can go wherever you want. You're a global currency holder, isn't it? So, I think it is, as someone said, is changing everything about money and trust in the records that we know as of today. But the beauty is, while crypto is still kind of, we don't treat it as legitimate yet. Many of us would not touch a crypto. But believe me, if I can tell you one thing with all disclaimers and caution, one of my good friends who is working for a company in Oman, only last year beginning, 2017 beginning, he invested some balance, small money that he had, some $10,000 he invested in Bitcoin. You know what is the value last December? 130 times. So he says, value Wait. Caution. Today is a different day. So how does Bitcoin and blockchain work? The beauty is today, as auditors, what are we most crazy about with the client?
Evidence.
Yes, sir? Evidence. No, there is something before that. Balance sheet and profit and loss and agreement of the books of accounts produced before me, right? We still don't know whether an agreement because the computer tells you it is an agreement. We trust it. But here they are solving this problem. They say very simple. Let us say 10 of us are engaged in one transaction. Distributor, manufacturer, this, that, end consumer. Let us say 10 of us. Okay? Everybody has to write books of accounts. They say, why should everybody write books of accounts for the same transaction again and again and again? And somebody doesn't write in between. He will write wrongly. They say, we will take over the job of writing books of accounts. So this is what is called as the triple entry bookkeeping system. You, the person whom you transacted with, and the blockchain distribution network. So this kind of maintains the trust in the entire system. Of course, we'll not go into the details of technology, but the technology ensures that the encryption underlying blockchain is so strong that once it becomes reasonably popular, you cannot break it. That's how Bitcoin is still surviving. So blockchain has tremendous use, tremendous use. Everywhere you have a problem with efficiency, cost, vulnerability, it is useful. So it is you got shared, replicated, permissioned ledgers, right? This is a case, I'm not going to the details. So the auditor also he'll be given access to that blockchain. Whatever he wants to do, his software will run and it tell him whether it is fine or not. That's it. There's not really much to do about it, because anyway there is nothing called as books not in agreement. Of course, this will take a whole lot of time to come, because all of us in the community have to be part of the blockchain. And today there are a lot of problems also with blockchain, because there are too many blockchain providers. If you are on this blockchain provider, how do I connect with that blockchain provider? So there are problems, no doubt, but it is there very much as a solution. And it also can execute shared smart contracts. What is smart contract? For example, I have an AMC which has to be renewed every year, and I have to make sure that the fellow is coming and servicing it 6 times a year and only billing me for the parts that he does. Today what do? There is one fellow in the factory who is in charge, or a department which is in charge for preventive maintenance. And he has a whole army of people around him who does all this. What are they doing now? Entire thing is put on blockchain. The blockchain you just fill up the contract, say it should be serviced 6 times a year. Automatically when it does the service, there are solutions which CNC machines connect to that, and it will tell you, for example, have they replaced this particular item. So it can detect it and automatically update the books of accounts to say, yes, this has been done. Next time renewal comes, it will auto-renew it. Maybe just keep you informed as a matter of courtesy. So, lot of things like this. Insurance, if you take, anything that is structured logic in your contracts, which most of them are, a blockchain is capable of executing. So, a promise of the blockchain typically is every agreement, every process, every task and every payment would have a digital record. And the signature that could be identified, validated, stored and shared. Electronic signature, just like you use the token. Right? Intermediaries like this, where the problem is, lawyers, auditors, brokers, bankers might be right? Individuals, organizations, machines and algorithms would freely interact with one another with little friction. This is still utopian, don't worry. At least in my generation, I don't know if it will come in India. You don't know. So this is what it is, distributed ledger technology. We have to respect blockchain because it is impeding on our area. Ledger na namakku puriyum. So you're touching the ledger. Somebody touches something that we own. It's a problem. So blockchain, we have to have little respect, try to understand, increase transparency, inherent security, digital payments, reduce transmission cost, faster transactions. One of the areas in which blockchains is being very widely applied across the globe is remittances. Global remittance. Today, first you need to contact your bank. You want to transfer some money to somebody in Saudi Arabia, let's say. Your bank will have to identify a correspondent bank for that currency. Right? Then that bank correspondent will have to contact the correspondent bank of your person in that country. Then they will have an intermediary bank, and there will be another bank, and that will go to the customer, right? All of them want the pound of flesh, no? So cost of remittance comes to 3% almost. 3% of just my money going to my friend is too much, no? So blockchain said, hell with you guys. Banks, I don't want any banks. We'll run it even amongst ourselves. So today it is 0.01%. 0.01% or even less. And earlier in the traditional route it takes 3 or 4 days for the transfer to get affected. Here it is instant. Ripple is a very popular blockchain which is widely used in many countries as a replacement to SWIFT network. Because the international payments, the way that they transfer money, you should read up about Ripple. It's very, very interesting, the way that they are. So, as I said, the underlying technology is blockchain. Cryptocurrency is a use case for blockchain, whereas blockchain can be used for several other things. There is a whole lot of things happening with blockchain. Like all these fellows are doing quite a lot with blockchain on foreign exchange, cross-border settlements, securities trading. So all this is happening already. And in fact, the Bank of Canada, they came out with their own digital currency. In fact, RBI is also considering looking at coming out with the India cryptocurrency. Because they are saying that whom to trust otherwise. Very difficult job. But the big problem is, imagine, till yesterday it was the black money problem. Tomorrow it will be the cryptocurrency problem. Because the economy will simply put an indicator and walk away through cryptocurrency, no? There will be no regulator who can regulate it. That's the problem with Hawala, right? So it is believed that Bitcoin has served as a fantastic alternative when demonetization came in. Everybody said Bitcoin, buy Bitcoin. That's the reason the Bitcoin price in India went up significantly during that time. That's a belief we don't know. In India, there are many of the startups which are doing fantastic work on innovating blockchain solutions. Like PrimeChain is one, which is doing a great job. They have helped banks automate their entire KYC process. Right? Then Sophical is one which is doing a lot of industry-wide applications across. Easy Remit is another. Records Keeper is another. I mean, there are a lot of such, there are at least 20 top such blockchain innovation providers who are doing good job in trying to help automate it. And mind you, it will catch on because the cost is so low, business obviously will just lap it up, provided it works fine. And blockchain is already happening like election voting. All this color voter business or this, your EVM not working, hacked, all that business will go off once you have blockchain because it will absolutely record onto the ledger right across, so multiple copies. Taxation again, citizen services, land records. Land records, fantastic, believe me. Otherwise, today you buy a property and what is the biggest worry you have? Parent document. What is the history? Right? And when you are enjoying a property and you bequeath it to your son, to your grandson, and somebody comes from the previous owner and said, no, this is my property. All this gets solved once you have the entire system coming into blockchain. So there is again financial sector, logistics. We can keep on, like today, tracking of parts in automobiles. Blockchain does a fantastic job. They can identify by car where it is and say they'll send an SMS to you saying that recall part number so and so, we'll just come to the garage, we'll change it. They also know by this which vendor in which batch messed up with the product. Fabulous, no? Not only that, food chain. They know, for example, a tomato puree, from which farm the tomato came, where it got crushed, what got added into it, you can find out through blockchain. So today blockchain in certification of food products is again a huge thing. Of course, come back to our favorite. Put all this in the context of this. Let us say you are going to meet with a client saying that, I mean, I always tell you, this. I mean, let's say you go for this last year audit. I don't know if you ever had an experience. They say, sir, one to last year we invested about 20 lakhs in Bitcoin. We got 5 lakhs balance. Cash counting. Valuation of cash. Do you treat it as legal tender? It is not legal tender, mind you. It is not legal tender. Confirmation of balance? So, if you really start looking into it, and the money that is made from purchase and sale of gain from a Bitcoin or a loss from a Bitcoin, I am booking a loss with Bitcoin sale. Is it allowed in Income Tax Act? Income Tax Act doesn't bother, isn't it? You make money, you don't make money, pay tax. Illegal, not illegal, I don't care, isn't it? They don't go by what is legal. Smuggling la paisa andada, kaas katte right? So, we're going to have a rethink on the entire audit report, the way it is going to look a couple of years from now. Because you'll have autonomous systems. I mean, you're going and, I mean, we are talking about a car today, okay? And tomorrow morning they call you to an Ola audit. What will you do? Agreement to the books of accounts? Yes, agreement to the books of accounts. How did you check it? How do you know that the internal controls or financial reporting and IFC with the latitude and longitude that were mapped onto that particular transaction were properly built as per the declared tariff? But how do you know that what was sent to the client as a receipt is actually what is getting recorded in the books? How do you know there is no management fraud? Problem? So be cautious. So all this, as I said, is going to under this true and fair view. What is true and fair view? That is where we hold our right, isn't it? சொல்ல மாட்டோம். Yeah, true and fair view is something we decide based upon the judgment of the auditor, isn't it? Even though there are a lot of principles surrounding that. So now, is it true and fair view with regard to the Ola books of accounts? Flipkart. How did it happen?
We are not saying true and fair view to the books of the accounts. We are saying true and fair view to the state of affairs of things.
Correct.
Which is much more complicated than books of
I agree. And then you have this fair valuation principle. We'll not take too much of that. So all this, it is going to change in terms of transaction, trust and compliance could be out. All compliance business, which is like, I always am little confused because I am not a GST expert. I don't know anything about GST except for know the basics of GST. But I always hear there is huge opportunities in GST. I am wondering, what could be the opportunities? You can correct me my thinking because I don't understand. At the most, there could be tariff. What tariff will apply where? How reverse charge should be taken? All that will get sorted out maybe another 2 years. After this, upload, download practice. Am I right or wrong? So 2 years from the line, you will have NSDL or integrated enterprise saying 20 rupees return filing. Should we go for that pie at all? So these are problems we don't know. But where we are missing the bus, automation of bookkeeping, simply tally for traders who are coming in. They don't have accounts. That's still a huge practice. If you are able to integrate that with such taxation systems, it will benefit them and we also create a fantastic revenue cycle even if we don't want to broach into the new areas of practice. Because rather than GST, a bundle of bookkeeping from GST offer I would think is a fantastic deal for the guy who has never maintained books of accounts. I don't know. So cryptocurrencies, we'll just jump this. I think today this is a little old value. I don't know what is the value today, 10 lakhs for Bitcoin? Yeah? I don't know what it is. Whatever. Sorry. So, but this is, some problem with this. Internal controls not commensurate with size and nature of business. Okay. So Rick Flavin is another Bitcoin. So he says, Bitcoin will do to the banks what email did to postal industry. Too much, no? Scary. In fact, that's the reason if you see many of the banks, they're shutting down branches. They don't want to open branches. Cost of transaction is so high. Millennial customers, do you think that they'll come to the branch? How many of your kids have seen a branch? He comes doorstep, he opens your account, then you don't care where the bank is, isn't it? You just do the transactions. So that is how it is going to be as such. And if you see world cryptocurrencies, all the greens are the countries which accept cryptocurrency as legal. Only red, China if you see, they don't accept. The yellows are all undecided fellows. They don't know whether to treat it or not. Then we have peer financing, which is a huge industry in China. I have spare money, you want spare money. I actually want to give it to you. How do you trust you? So blockchain network in peer finance gives you a credit score, your social score, and tells you this guy is dependable, give him, take a chance. Put him on 20% interest, he'll give, no problem. You make money. You don't need a bank. You don't need to go through any of the structures. Smart city, it's huge. We will not discuss this here. It's going to be a completely interconnected mesh of digital information, which is going to drive everything, street lights to this, to that, everything. Of course, it's still far from, I don't know if we have any implementation in India yet. I'm not aware. So, quickly the future of the profession. The question is, actually this year 2000, this was the species, so oryx, which was declared extinct. I hope the accountant will not be the next. Current accountant will be next. So if you don't transform and you say, no, I will stick on to my practice of taxation and bookkeeping only in the way that I am doing now, it could be a problem. So the questions are, A, financial systems, autonomous systems, collaborative digital payments, which you're already seeing happening. Look at your Flipkart experience. It's seamless, isn't it? 3 minutes, everything is done. Imagine how many books get written across. How many payment transfers happen within that. So that's going to be the future for sure. Unless somebody wants to insist that I go to the shop and buy. So, if you were to tomorrow morning called upon to audit a Uber or a Flipkart, How prepared are we? Can we take it up confidently and yet say, I'll be able to do all that's required? Answer actually is yes. We just need to change our mindset a bit and start looking at things in a different dimension. That's all. Operational audits, internal audits, as you see, the scope is huge. Internal audit is going to boom. Why? Because everywhere there will be a trust problem. This camera, I don't know what it is trying to do to me, because it will take my snap, go to the internet, Google my face, find out everything about me and send it to the owner of this camera. Problem idea. Possible or not? So every time I look at the camera, I am also worried. So trust is going to be a more bigger problem in the future. And that is where we'll need to come in to say, yes, we put a tag on that, ICI certified, I'm just saying. So systems audit, we are going to look at tremendous changes in system audit the way it is today. Taxation, intelligent applications will come in, cross-border, GDPR, privacy. I mean, 25th of this month you heard about the GDPR, General Data Protection Act, which is a huge thing. And it's so scary if you really look at it, the way that your personal information has to be stored and protected. So auditing in the digital age is going to be driven by a mesh of big data, advanced analytics, AI, mobility and more. We just need to keep our eyes and ears open and see the opportunities, how we can transform our way of working. And we'll be there. We need to be there. There's nobody else who can understand both sides. So unleash the auditor in you. Let us say you are called upon to audit this thing. I told you, no, this is a drone. Are you ready? Take your experience. You get onto this drone and you say, okay, take me to Porur. Obviously, like Ola, you'll book a drone, right? It will come and say drone waiting on your terrace. You go climb onto it and it says welcome to blah blah service, whatever. So much money has been deducted from your wallet. Thank you for consuming our service. You take off and you imagine your experience in the drone, right? You're all by yourselves in the sky. Wonderful or not? And then when you reach Porur, it says, this is the hacker speaking, $20,000 to get you down. What do? Help. You're all alone yourself in the skies. So these are problems which are not unreal, these are real. I'm just making little more cinematic about it, but these are real problems. And we still don't have solutions. Autonomous car goes and commits an accident. Our cop fellow comes. Case yaar par le car da sir. Software fellow good one. So we have problems. Now come back to our work that we do, no? The IFC, now start filling all this up for this drone business. It's crazy. Because now the organizations are worried about real risk. They say, bhai, it's all okay, tell me it's risky or not. Where is my risk? So, this is what Thomson Reuters, John Barron, he says that next 20 years will see the profession evolve rapidly. In short, it will be a very different profession from what we see today. Everything that we do will be different. We just need to be open to that change. That's what is the first point. I'm just going to rush through because another 5 minutes. Vidya?
Yeah.
Okay. So, this is the dark side of the profession, if you really see. As I said, Equifax, I'm sure you read about Equifax. I mean, you call it as the most respected organization in the US, having every adult citizen's data there, and they've declared that everything is gone. Now you don't know how many years this data will be outside and what they can use it for. Yes or no? They got so much of information about you. Odisha ATM, this is a fantastic case. In Odisha, in one region, in one district, 20 ATMs started spewing out cash. The Mahalakshmi case. It's just spewing out cash. But exactly one guy comes and picks it up and runs away. Then the police really launched a case and they found out, how this is happening. They were shocked to see. The guy has planted a software and a SIM card into that ATM. He remotely controls it. Asks a dispenser to dispense cash without affecting any of your accounts. Don't worry. Bank ka paisa ho. So they can't do that. That cycle is different. They got good internal controls over that. He says, we'll not touch that cycle. This mechanical operation will make it happen. 20 ATMs were affected. They said, who did it? Then they really caught hold of the guy. The beauty was, this guy was a auto rickshaw puller. Rickshaw puller. The police was completely blank. They said, rickshaw puller, we have got brilliant guys in our country. So I asked them, he said, the point is, he was in Bangalore jail for 3 months, and his jailmate was one fellow who was a professional ATM hacker. என்ன பண்றது 2 பேரும் 3 மாசத்துக்குள்ள உட்கார்ந்து MOOC, transfer knowledge. Of course, UPI, this was another big problem. Maharashtra Bank's UPI, it costed them a huge fraud. We don't have the time to go into that, but here where the audit really comes in. So transforming audit, what do we know about it? Number one, we are experts in understanding business operations, accounting, risk control. Let us please keep that very clear. So once we do that, understand first business tech aligned strategy. Have you done the right things for your type of business and the controls is going to whatever technology that you're using? And we have to move to risk-based audit. Identify business tech-oriented audit goals. Align them with your control and business risk goals. IT audits are no more separate. There is not saying that system auditor, internal audit. There is no now division. Everybody has to be a system auditor. Everybody has to understand internal controls. There is no choice left. So it is all integrated audits. That's how it will go on. Audit tooling is very important for us now, because you cannot go and say, how do I now audit this drone without an equipment? So you would need to acquire, embed equipment, integrate and train people to work on such kind of tools. Measure audit performance to goals, because that is where you will be saying whether I am really achieving that or not, and what are the learnings, like an artificial intelligence. Transform audit culture, look at continuous reviews. So this is where I think it is going to happen. So what do we need to do for that? Number one, let us please understand where we are going to be in demand. We will still remain trusted third parties. That's for sure. Because there is this knowledge of somebody understanding business, somebody understands risks and controls, accounting, ultimately money, no? So I am bothered. So now problem is, everything has gone into some gadget like this. So we have to now look at how do you really decipher that gadget in our own knowledge of what we are doing. So that is where they will help. The business is going to help in dealing with the risk and disruptive technologies. CAs will be as trust brokers with more profound dimension which is sure to change. So what do we need to do? Number one, reskill and embed tech to survive. That is number one. Number two, very important that we all do, there are a lot of free courses online like data science, analytics. There are some fantastic courses free of cost. You can join one of these courses from Harvard, Stanford or whatever, and they can be, a tremendous approach of thinking itself changes. I mean, some of them are fantastic. I have been part of a couple of them. Superb. Data governance and accounting, financial programs is going to be important, because we need to know what is going to happen. But we thought this technology itself was very difficult. And you know this guy called Elon Musk, no? This guy doesn't keep quiet. He has now come out with this car, which is a mind-driven car. I had a fight with my wife and I come and drive this car, what happens? So this is what is called as a brain driver or the Neuralink, and it integrates so many technologies. So it is supposed to be, you don't have to do anything. You're just thinking about, okay, Mylapur Polama, it will take you to Mylapur. Anyway, I think all this is happening, and these are all real. You got this refrigerator was unveiled last year in CES 2017, which is one of the most celebrated events. This is from LG. It's an IoT refrigerator. You can talk to the refrigerator, it will take orders for you. It will control all the levels of various things in the refrigerator. It can connect to your mobile, it can connect to whatever, right? It of course connects to your payment networks, right? You say, okay, refrigerator, today order this much rice, this much this much that. It will take the order, send it through Big Bazaar, pay it through online, and you'll get somebody on your door. Only thing, maybe a robot will also take it and put it back inside. But there is internal control issue there? Yes or no? Because suddenly you have the ting tong in your, and somebody is coming with, coming from Arvin, 6,000 liters of milk ordered by a refrigerator. Your problem is not where to store that 6,000. Problem is how much got deducted from your wallet. So these are real things, believe me. So the takeaways are, I think the cyber is here to stay and will be more profound. It will lead to the inevitable transformation of the profession. There is absolutely no two doubts about it. Technology is such that whatever we saw is going to disrupt the profession, but in varying timelines. It is not that tomorrow morning, oh my goodness, we are all gone. No. Fortunately, our country gives us that comfort. So we'll have a little more time, but it is for us to see how fast we can grow. Repetitive and structured tracks will hold no more value because it has no professional service. Great demand for consulting and assurance is going to be there. Newer professional skills will be needed, newer opportunities, newer dimension of emerging biz tech. Time to transform to a cyber CA. That's it. With this I stop with my favorite quote from Ramana Maharishi. It is us who has to realize, not the world. Thank you so much.
We can have time for maybe 2 or 3 questions, or we can even take the questions offline during lunch. I'll leave the option to you. Anyway, I don't see questions forthcoming. So thank you very much, Mr. Vittal, for the wonderful session. It is quite informative, and it is a harsh reality that we have to necessarily upskill ourselves, otherwise we will soon be obsolete. So I think this gives us a lot of thought for us to go back and sort of reskill ourselves. Thank you very much once again. As a matter of appreciation,
Thank you very, very much being here. Can I request and find out who was the first person who walked into the room today for this conference? Please come. We'd like you to present an award to the speakers. So we were pretty actually 70% full this morning at 10 a.m., which is some kind of a feat by our standards. So an applause to yourselves and to the speakers. This is Ranjit, a chartered accountant. He's with EIT Paris. So, could I please request Revati to present a memento to the speaker? Thanks very much to Partha as well for being here today. We break for lunch now, and we'll reconvene after lunch. Thank you.
Dubai is doing it, don't
Email this. It is there, it's there, record. Nothing is
Yes. We'll get it loaded. Just a minute. Can you plug in my laptop? Yeah, you can plug in your laptop. Because I want to stop between the two presentations. How will laptop load for you? Thanks so much, sir.
சொன்ன டைம் கொஞ்சம்
கம்ப்யூட்டரே இந்தியாவுக்கு வராதுன்னு
பயப்படுத்துறேன்னு சொல்றாரு. அப்புறம் என்ன பண்றது?
பயமுறுத்தி விட வேண்டியது சார். என்னோட ஸ்டூடெண்ட்ஸுக்கே நான் ஏதாவது டெக்னாலஜியில் ஏதாவது சொல்லி நான் சொல்லிட்டேன் இல்லை 6 மாதத்துக்கு அப்புறம் கேள்வி கேட்காதீங்க.
I just came in yesterday. I was doing that. One week in a week.
Based on Lagran, they can get some extent what they can add. So what is yeah, generally what happens is like issue of tender, legal tender. So like Bitcoin they decided to issue so many numbers. That's the reason price keeps on rising. Then what do? You can start one more cryptocurrency. Then buy that. You can start migrating. Already it is available. So many currencies going in Ripple and there are exchanges which will give you all that information.
Quite intriguing, quite really open.
So what do you also I'm a computer engineer.
Management consultants.
What kind of
range? We do a lot of process range. Don't specialize in that. Yeah. Quite intriguing. Thank you very much for opening us up.
Chaitanya, CSC and CFP. Nice, I really enjoyed it. Maybe I'm right now in so the latest is nice, very informative. Why but it's
moving faster than what you Yes, sir. I always say he is the person who created the revolution in the media space.
Personally, the penultimate I'm from
Good afternoon.
yesterday. We try to
because I don't have a HDMI.
அதான் அவன் சொல்லாமல் சொல்லிட்டாரு அது சொல்லக்கூடாது ஆனால் நான் ரெக்கார்ட்ஸ் ரிப்ளேஸ் பண்ணுறேன்னு
Go back to Sun Tzu Arts of War, Art of War, what did he say? Understand the effect behind the event that could be most of it is getting touched. Sir, a moment of lunch one. Lunch some.
We'll start the third technical session. You know, this session is on the risk-based internal auditing, RBIA. The theme of the national seminar itself is no risk and no reward. KNOW also we can say, NO, no also we can say. No risk, no reward, no pain, no gain. In fact, one Chinese general has stated like this: know your friends close and know your enemies closer. Applying that, it will be know your opportunities well and know your risks very well. That's how it goes. Even in this case of share trading, as an investor or as a businessman, risk reward ratio is very important. So you must compute the risk reward ratio and then you have to do the trading for better results. In lottery game, reward is very high, but then we should also know the probability of occurrence. That is very important. There are different styles of management. Management by objectives, management by rewards, management by threats is also there. So nowadays, management by risk is the in thing. Any activity for that matter, whether it is a profit-making company, not-for-profit company, service industry or wherever, basing on risk, you have to manage the entire affair. So and so, the internal auditor has also know the risk. Basing on the risk assessment, he has to plan the annual audit and then he has to perform the audit. Even Reserve Bank of India has started risk-based supervision of banking sector. They attempted in the year 2003-04, but they could not succeed that system. Later on they reintroduced in the year 2009-10, and then now they are following the risk-based supervision of banking sector. In fact, even in pricing of products, banks are following risk-based approach. They do the risk assessment, risk rating, and depending upon the risk level, the pricing of the products. The rate of interest also will vary according to the risk rating. All this shows that risk-based internal audit is very important. So we have with us Ms. Bhavani Joyce. She is from Infosys. She is heading the internal audit and SOX. I'll just read out her profile. A high-performing risk and assurance professional and currently head of internal audit and SOX of Infosys Limited. Formerly Director Enterprise Risk Services at Deloitte India and Director of Risk and Assurance at Cancer Research United Kingdom. Demonstrable record of achievement in formulating and implementing integrated approaches to governance, risk and internal controls, as well as measurement and improvement within large private sector and not-for-profit organizations. Combines high levels of commercial acuity and systems knowledge with advanced planning capabilities in analyzing strategic priorities and delivering precise value-added solutions. A very resourceful and politically astute individual offering strong business leadership and exceptional influencing skills at C-level and cross multidisciplinary local and global teams. I invite Bhavani Joyce to the dais. In fact, when we invited her, please, we told her, you give an overview of risk-based internal auditing, right from risk identification, risk analysis, risk profiling, risk rating, all these things, monitoring and all that. But she came up with an idea that instead of covering at the basic level, I will go one step advance. Risk psychology of the auditee, all those things also I will cover. So I leave it to Bhavani and also to the audience. If you want overview of the risk-based internal auditing as such, she will cover it quickly and then move on to risk psychology and other advanced aspects. Over to Bhavani, please.
A very warm afternoon to everybody. I've got the difficult slot after lunch, so I'll do my best to keep this fairly technical topic interesting. Before I start, I would, as Mr. Vidyadharan had outlined, I was quite passionate to talk about risk psychology, and then he said, no, let's do a technical overview of risk-based internal audit. So a show of hands, please, your comfort level with understanding the basics of risk-based internal auditing. Okay. Raise your hand if you know it comfortably well. Okay, that's less than 50% of the room. Would you like me to give a quick overview then of what risk-based internal auditing actually is? Yeah. Would that help? Okay, I will do it quickly. Bear with me if you think I need to go into it a little bit more. Please ask questions in between. What Mr. Vidyadharan read sounded like my CV, so let me just give a quick introduction about who I am. I don't think he told you who I am. So yes, I do head the risk and audit function of audit and SOX function of Infosys. This is my 5th year in India, so I have not worked in India long. 15 years I've worked in London and lived there for 18 years, including doing my degree. I'm actually from Malaysia. I'm a born and brought up Malaysian. But of course, you know, life takes you into different places. I married a Kannadiga and now I live in Bangalore. So that's how life is. I had a good career in London. I was head of audit and risk for Cancer Research UK, a very large NGO in the UK. I think where I really gelled together my technical and business understanding of risk-based internal auditing, because you have to have the right opportunity to also implement RBIA. It's not something you can just do anywhere and everywhere. So that was a really important place for me to actually, like a playground where kids learn to play, right? You need a playground where they give you the freedom to practice certain things that you read in the books. Very few of us, or some of us, are very lucky to have such playgrounds. The rest must constantly seek them so that you can practice with confidence. I think that's where I had a lot of help. I suppose my passion for psychology also has evolved since I was in the UK. When I found very basic things that we should be able to do in business as an auditor, which were being faced with resistance. Now those resistance have meaning, and if we can understand why those resistance occur, as auditors we would have a much easier job of overcoming those resistance. So I spent some time studying neuro-linguistic programming, which is a method to basically communicate with the brain through interventions. We face lots of difficulty psychologically in life. I mean, arguments with friends, parents, husbands, wives, children. Stress puts a lot of pressure on our mind, and how do you recalibrate? It's like resetting your mind every night before going to bed, so that you wake up fresh the next morning and deal with the next set of scenarios God has planned for us. And I think internal auditors have an even more difficult job, because you are constantly on the adversarial side, right? You're always telling somebody that you're not doing a good enough job or whatever. So you're always in that position where you are having to have a possible negative conversation, and every time you have to do that, there is an impact on you. It's not just the impact on the person, not just the auditee gets impacted by a risk-based conversation. The person delivering that conversation also is impacted, and often you are in a position where you are speaking to an expert. The person who is running that process is an expert. You are not the expert. So how do you tell an expert that he's wrong? It has a very huge psychological impact on somebody. If you just in your day-to-day life, you see the policeman and you get scared. Not that you've done anything wrong, but there is a power to the stature of being a police officer. When you are speaking to an owner of the data center of a company that you're auditing, there is a bit of power there. He knows every single wire in that data center. You are trying to tell him that there are problems with his data center. It's not easy. So if you're psychologically balanced when you go into those conversations, you will come out feeling great, you will leave them feeling great, and that's what I believe. So I spent a lot of time, the last 4 or 5 years researching on what could that mean for auditors and how can we make our lives simpler by understanding why people behave the way they do. I hope, time permitting, I'll be able to take you and give you some of that insight and also some of the things I believe we can do as auditors to deal with that challenge when we face it every day. In the context, I mean, we all have we all manage risk personally. I think we all have, I'm sure, a risk-based internal audit plan for our personal lives. If we don't, we should have one. Life is all about taking risks. We all take risks personally and we enjoy the rewards, but when it comes to business, we often have a different risk appetite when it comes to business and that we have personally. Understanding our personal risk appetites are also very important to help you understand business risk appetite. I, for one, for example, was telling Mr. Kumar over there that I have 5 children. That's a risk appetite I've taken to have so many, and and only on hindsight do you realize the consequence of having so many, because you have to fund them through education and everything else. So every decision you take has a consequence. I think appreciating personal risk as well as business risk makes you a much stronger auditor. Without further ado, let me just start. These are the things I'm going to cover. Overview of RBIA, the planning objectives, the planning challenges, risk maturity, very, very important part of RBIA, risk management overview, only if you want me to. If you feel, and when I come to that, I'll take a poll as to how comfortable you are with how to do a risk assessment and a risk management activity, and if you need me to go through that, I will. Then we move to risk-based audit planning, audit execution, and some of the critical success factors for RBIA. I have another set of slides, by the way, for risk psychology, which is what I first prepared. I've loaded that also on this machine. So the sooner I finish this, I will load the other presentation. So the IIA talks about RBIA, and I only want to quote 3 key points. Providing assurance, we talked about that a lot this morning. Managing risk effectively, and risk appetite. So providing assurance is one objective or challenge for us. That risk management is managing risk effectively. For you to audit that, you need to know risk management really well. And third, you have to understand the company's risk appetite, and not an easy thing to understand. So these are the 3 challenges when you come to doing RBIA. What are the stages of RBIA? First and foremost, assessing risk maturity. Now, many companies are still grappling with implementing